Before we begin, settle into a comfortable position. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breath fall into its natural rhythm. And let me ask you something quietly. Have you ever felt a strange, private curiosity about the time before time? Not the recorded centuries you learned in school. Not the kings or empires or ages labeled neatly on timelines. But the eras that left no stories, the epochs where human memory simply dissolves. Do you ever wonder what lived in the blank spaces? Tonight we descend into those gaps, the silent rooms of history that exist between civilizations, between discoveries, between the fragments the world left behind. But before we wander through those forgotten corridors, I want to ask something simple. Where are you listening from tonight? Are you lying in bed, letting sleep pull you closer? Are you listening during a quiet moment after a long day? Are you walking through a dimly lit room, wanting something soft and contemplative to settle your mind? Let me know in the comments. It helps this journey feel shared, as if across miles and time zones, we are all walking through history together. Now, close your eyes if you wish, slow your breathing, and step with me into a place where the past doesn't feel like a line, but a maze. A maze with missing walls. A maze built from everything we know and everything we don't. Imagine a vast library. Not a modern one with polished floors and bright lights, but an ancient hall with vaulted ceilings, lit only by flickering lanterns. Dust floats like drifting constellations, suspended in the amber glow. Shelves stretch endlessly in every direction, crowded with tablets, scrolls, maps, bones wrapped in linen, clay fragments stamped with symbols no one has fully deciphered. Hundreds of thousands of years of human memory sit in this imaginary library. But as you walk deeper, you begin to notice something unsettling. Entire shelves are empty. Rows of scrolls end abruptly. Wooden drawers contain nothing but air. Stone tablets lie broken, their inscriptions severed mid-sentence. Whole corridors of knowledge exist, only as scaffolding, with no books inside. That is human history. A magnificent library where most of the shelves are blank. Because for all the dates we memorize, all the events we reconstruct, all the tools unearthed and bones carbon dated, the truth is simple. We have forgotten far more than we remember. And the deeper we dig into time, the deeper the silence becomes. Consider this. Anatomically modern humans, people who looked like us, thought like us, dreamed and feared like us, have existed for around 300,000 years. And yet, we only have reliable historical records for the last 5,000. That means 98% of our story is missing, not erased, not destroyed, not hidden in some conspiracy, just unrecorded, unwritten, lost to time. It's as if humanity walked through a long, winding corridor, carrying a torch that illuminated only the last stretch of the path, while the immense length behind us remains unlit, its details swallowed by darkness. We know that humans lived during those missing millennia. They migrated, hunted, painted caves, built shelters, sang songs, raised children, survived winters. But the fine grain of their lives, the ways they organized themselves, the stories they told, the knowledge they passed down, has thinned to a whisper. And the whisper itself is fading. So tonight, we follow that whisper. We step into the void between chapters, into the fractures between ages, into the quiet spaces where human history is no longer a timeline, but a puzzle with half its pieces absent. This is not a journey of conspiracy or speculation. It is a journey of patience, to marvel at what remains and to acknowledge the vastness of what doesn't. Because sometimes the most haunting mysteries are not the ones carved into stone, but the ones carved away by time. Let us begin with the most profound disappearance of all, the one so enormous we rarely realize what it means. The long silence before civilization. Close your eyes again and imagine standing at the edge of a desert where wind has erased every footprint. That's what human prehistory looks like. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in ways that left barely a trace. Think about your own life, the objects that define you, your home, your tools, your devices, your books, your messages, your stories stored in photos and text and digital fragments. Now, imagine everything you own, built from bone, wood, fiber, ash, materials that dissolve into earth within a generation. Imagine your culture relying not on writing, but on spoken memory, passed from parent to child, from elder to tribe, from tribe to wanderers who left no written map for future scholars. Imagine your whole civilization lasting thousands of years, but leaving nothing for archaeologists except a few hearths, a scattering of tools, a faint discoloration in soil. Civilizations can rise, thrive, and collapse without leaving a single surviving temple, not a single inscription, not a single story carved in stone. So, when we talk about lost epochs, we're not imagining forgotten golden ages. We're acknowledging a simple, humbling truth. Most human stories were told out loud and vanished the moment the storytellers did. This is why prehistory feels like a fog. We know someone walked through it, but the footprints refuse to appear. Archaeologists work like quiet detectives in this silence, piecing together bones, shards, flakes of obsidian, resin samples, carbonized seeds. Each discovery widens the doorway a little, but the room beyond that doorway is so vast that even after a century of excavation, we have barely illuminated a corner. Now, let the scene shift. Imagine yourself walking through a canyon at dusk, the sky a soft violet, the air cooling as sunlight sinks behind the rock. You see a handprint on the canyon wall, pressed there by a person who lived 20,000 years ago. Their life is gone, their language is gone, their family, their tribe, their stories, gone. But their handprint remains, a single gesture that survived while everything else vanished. When we find marks like these, in caves, on cliff faces, scratched into stone, we feel something more than curiosity. We feel recognition, because the people who made them were reaching forward through time without knowing it, leaving signs to say, I was here, I lived, I saw this world. This is the heart of every mystery in ancient history, not dramatic civilizations erased by catastrophe, not forgotten continents, not lost empires, but something quieter, a longing for continuity, and a world that rarely grants it. History is not a chain, it is a tapestry full of tears and loose threads, and the oldest threads have frayed almost completely. Let us walk further now, into one of the strangest patterns hidden inside this long silence. Humanity appears suddenly, then disappears, then appears again. Not literally, but culturally. Archaeologists see patterns like this, bursts of invention, followed by decline, followed by reinvention, followed by disappearance, followed by sudden leaps forward again. It is not a straight line, it is a heartbeat. And like a heartbeat, the rhythm contains pauses. These pauses, these empty stretches, are the lost epochs, not destroyed, simply not preserved. And in those gaps, anything could have happened. Not in a fantastical sense, but in a human sense. Knowledge may have risen and faded like breath. Stories may have flourished and vanished without a trace. Technologies may have been invented and forgotten before anyone wrote them down. Because writing, the tool that preserves memory, is painfully young. For 295,000 years of our existence, we left no written record. So if humanity had 1,000 forgotten breakthroughs, we would never know. This is the humbling beauty of archaeology. It reveals how much we have lost, not how much we have found. And this brings us to something important, a realization that threads through tonight's entire journey. History is not a full account of the human past. It is a collection of survivals. We study what lasted, not what happened. We read what was written, not what was spoken. We excavate what endured, not what was beloved. We inherit what stone preserved, not what minds created. So when we speak of unexplained gaps, we are not imagining something supernatural. we are acknowledging something very real. The Earth forgot. Or perhaps it remembered in ways we no longer know how to read. We have only begun our descent. There are deeper mysteries waiting, entire chapters missing. From humanity's story, ancient revolutions that left no records, cultures that rose and vanished between glacial eras, buried coastlines swallowed by rising seas, civilizations wiped clean by disasters we barely understand. Epochs where humans lived in ways unlike anything we recognize today. The next chapter will guide you deeper into those quiet, vanished ages, into the lost world beneath the world we know. Let the world around you settle for a moment. Feel the quiet in the room, the softness of your breath, and imagine walking deeper into that ancient library of lost time, the one with hallways full of empty shelves, rooms filled with quiet dust, and doors that open into darkness rather than memory. You push open another door. This time, instead of silence, you hear water, a soft, rhythmic tide lapping against stone as if a distant sea were breathing. And as your eyes adjust, you realize you're no longer in a library at all. You're standing at the edge of an ancient shoreline, one that no longer exists. Because one of the greatest forgotten chapters in human history lies beneath the oceans. The submerged world. When the last ice age ended, between 12 and 8,000 years ago, the world's coastlines transformed dramatically. Sea levels rose more than 100 meters. Not slowly, not gently, but in massive surges that swallowed entire landscapes. Imagine watching the horizon creep closer each month, saying goodbye to fields, to forests, to homes built by your ancestors, to sacred places you could no longer reach. Imagine a world where continents looked different, shorelines carved inward like deep breaths. A world where millions of square kilometers of habitable land vanished beneath waves. Archaeologists estimate that some of the earliest human settlements, towns older than the pyramids, villages older than farming, ritual sites built before recorded myth, now lie drowned along the continental shelves. When the ocean rose, it erased not just villages, but entire epochs. What we call lost civilizations are often simply lost coastlines. The Mediterranean was once a fertile basin of valleys and human movement. Southeast Asia contained land bridges that no longer exist. The shores of North America extended far beyond the present beaches, and on these landscapes, humans lived for tens of thousands of years. They built things, they crafted rituals, they invented, they tried, they failed, they survived. And now, their entire world lies in silence, beneath shifting tides and silt. We have found hints, stone tools dredged by fishing nets, carved bones recovered from offshore banks, faint patterns detected by sonar. But these clues are splinters, not chapters. The ocean hides its stories well. Yet standing in your imagination at that drowned shoreline, you can almost see shapes moving below the surface, shadows of people who once lived. Rich, full lives that left almost nothing behind. Not because they weren't real, not because they weren't significant, but because the sea does not preserve their world. The ocean is a slow eraser, one wave at a time. Let us step away from the shoreline now and walk into another mystery, not one buried by water, but one buried by fire. The forgotten burn layers. When archaeologists dig through soil, they sometimes find something strange, a sudden dark layer of ash stretching across wide regions. Not a hearth, not a local fire, a continental burn scar. These layers appear in different parts of the world, in Europe, Asia, the Americas, Australia. Each one marks a moment when something changed so dramatically that the Earth itself recorded it. Sometimes the cause was climate, sometimes it was volcanic eruption, sometimes it was human migration, but sometimes the cause disappears. The soil holds the memory, but the world forgets the story. Imagine that, a global event so significant that it charred landscapes and reshaped lifeways, and yet the reason behind it is gone. These burn layers hint at upheavals no historian can fully reconstruct. They are geological echoes of crises no chronicler witnessed. And in their silence, we see something compelling. Not all disasters leave stories, some leave only questions. We stand at the edges of these layers, like detectives arriving long after the crime. The clues scattered, the motivations lost, the witnesses vanished. We can hold the evidence in our hands, but the meaning slips through our fingers. And so these layers become part of the lost epoch, moments where humanity changed direction in ways we still cannot explain. Now let us travel to a different kind of silence, not geological, not oceanic, but cultural. The vanishing of knowledge. Picture a firelit hut in a valley, 10,000 years ago. An elder sits with grandchildren and recites a story, not a myth, not a bedtime tale, but a precise map of ritual, tradition, medicine, craft, cosmology. A memory palace spoken aloud. No writing, no parchment, no symbols carved into stone. Only a voice shaped by generations, a voice carrying knowledge the community depends on. Then imagine winter comes early. A sudden illness sweeps the region, or a tribal conflict erupts, or migration pulls the group into unfamiliar lands. If that elder dies, before passing the story on, the knowledge disappears forever. Entire systems of understanding vanish like smoke, not through catastrophe, not through collapse, but through the quiet mathematics of oral tradition. Knowledge is fragile when it exists only in the mind. And for most of human history, that's where it lived. This creates one of the greatest mysteries of the lost epoch. How much did ancient people know that we will never rediscover? Their medicines, their star lore, their ecological mastery, their philosophies, their languages, most of it gone. Not lost to disaster, but lost to time, lost to silence, lost to the human condition. We think of history as progress, a rising line. But history is also forgetting. For every idea that survives, 1,000 vanish. For every invention we celebrate, there were countless others that dissolved without a trace. The past is not a story of accumulation. It is a story of attrition. It is a story of remembering and forgetting, mostly forgetting. Let us now walk into one of the strangest gaps of all, a place where human remains tell a story that our interpretations still struggle to explain. The sudden appearances. Archaeology shows a pattern. For long periods, technologies change very slowly, thousands of years at a time. Then suddenly, something leaps forward. Complex tools emerge abruptly. Art blooms unexpectedly. Symbolic behavior appears out of nowhere. Construction techniques shift dramatically. Cultural practices spread rapidly. Migration accelerates. Ritualism flourishes. It is not smooth. It is not gradual. It looks like a heartbeat spike. Something changes, but we do not know what. Was it climate? Population density? Resource scarcity? Environmental stress? A genetic mutation? Cultural innovation? Spiritual awakening? The earth does not say. What we see instead is the moment after. The moment when humans begin doing something new. Not because they evolved suddenly, evolution is slow, but because culture can transform quickly. Culture is fast. Culture is unpredictable. Culture is fragile. Culture can vanish and reappear like light behind moving clouds. These sudden appearances are not evidence of lost civilizations, nor of forgotten technologies, nor of vanished golden ages. They are evidence of something equally mysterious. Human potential awakening in unpredictable waves. Waves separated by long silences. Waves shaped by conditions we can no longer reconstruct. The lost epoch is hidden not only in what vanished, but in what appeared too suddenly to make full sense. Now come with me deeper, to a place where memory becomes myth, and myth becomes archaeology. where stories echo across millennia, not as facts, but as impressions, the old legends that predate writing. Across cultures worldwide, from indigenous Australia to sub-Saharan Africa, to the Arctic, to the Americas, to the Mediterranean, to the Himalayas, we find ancient myths that describe worlds we cannot fully identify. Stories from before writing, before agriculture, before settlements, before recorded anything. Legends of great migrations, floods long before biblical ones, beasts that no longer exist, ancestors moving through lands now underwater, lights in the sky, lost homelands, forgotten epochs, heroes and guardians whose identities have no archaeological match. These stories are not history, they are not literal, but they carry memory. They carry sensory impressions of things that happened in the deep human past. A volcanic eruption becomes a story of a mountain god's anger. A swallowed coastline becomes a tale of a sunken land. A meteor becomes a falling star deity. A migration becomes a journey of spirit ancestors. Through myth, we glimpse something fundamental. Even when history disappears, memory leaves shadows. Shadows that whisper of things we no longer recognize. Shadows that survive longer than facts. Shadows that outlive civilizations. Shadows that become the only bridge between what we know and what we lost. Now, let us leave the myths behind and return to the quiet earth, to footprints hardened into sediment, 40,000 years old, to bone fragments cracked by stone, to pigments ground from minerals that no longer exist in that region. You begin to see the shape of the lost epoch. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, not filled with mythical civilizations, but filled with silence. Silence that spans hundreds of millennia. And in that silence, humans lived full, complex lives that archaeology can only sense through faint residues. We are not looking for lost technological worlds. We are listening for the faintest echoes of humanity. The next chapter will carry you deeper into those faint echoes. Mass migrations, climatic shifts, extinction events, genetic bottlenecks, the rise and disappearance of forgotten cultures. The lost epoch is not a single mystery. It is a mosaic of mysteries, each a fragment of the world that existed before history learned to speak. Let the world around you soften for a moment. Let your breath fall into an easy rhythm. As we continue this descent into forgotten ages, you may begin to feel something subtle, a shift in perspective. We often imagine history as a series of events, dates, wars, rulers, inventions, collapses. But when we look closer, when we listen with quiet attention, we find that history behaves not as a straight line, nor as a simple chain of cause and effect, but as something alive, something that expands and contracts, something that breathes in long, uneven cycles. The lost epochs reveal this breathing most clearly. They show us that human memory does not unfold evenly. It surges, it retreats, it vanishes, it returns in unexpected shapes. What survived is not what was most important. It's simply what endured. And so, to understand what we lost, we must now follow a different thread, one that stretches across continents and across tens of thousands of years, a thread written not in stone, but in movement. The first great journeys. Imagine humanity not as a fixed settlement, but as a wandering constellation. Small groups traveling through forests, over mountains, across plains, along rivers, into harsh deserts, through frozen valleys, and across land bridges that no longer exist. The world they walked was larger than ours, not in size, but in possibility. Animals wandered where cities stand today. Grasslands thrived where seas now cover. Glaciers carved the earth like sculptors. Rivers flowed in places now dry as bone. Bird migrations painted the sky. Continents were pathways, not borders. As they moved, humans carried only what memory could bear: language, stories, rituals, songs, knowledge preserved not in ink, but in breath. These great journeys shaped the world, literally. Every step they took became the foundation for the civilizations that followed. But the journeys themselves are almost entirely lost. We trace them today not through stories and not through records, but through the quiet marks they left in the earth. Ancient hearths with charred seeds from plants that no longer grow there. Stone tools crafted from minerals carried across mountains. Shell beads traded hundreds of miles inland. Footprints fossilized by chance. DNA fragments left in the bones of forgotten ancestors. Each fragment is a soft murmur of a life lived fully in an age without writing. Each fragment is a single thread in a tapestry mostly vanished. If we could see the world as they saw it, we would not use words like primitive. We would see intelligence expressed through survival, creativity shaped by necessity, and adaptation executed with astonishing skill. Yet their world remains invisible to us because they left no monuments. Or perhaps they did, just not the kind we're trained to recognize. Now let us follow the trail deeper into one of the most significant disappearances of all. A disappearance not of people, but of diversity. The bottlenecks in humanity. Genetics tells a story that archaeology alone cannot. At several points in the distant past, the human population shrank suddenly, drastically, to only a few thousand individuals worldwide. The causes remain debated. Volcanic eruptions, climate swings, resource scarcity, disease, migration pressures, or something else entirely. What we know is that humanity nearly vanished, not once, but multiple times. Each bottleneck condensed the diversity of our species into a few surviving communities. Imagine how many languages disappeared, how many rituals, how many ideas, how many cultural lineages collapsed into silence. Imagine standing at the edge of one of those moments. A tribe dwindling, faces thin with hunger, the cold biting harder each year, the sky gray with ash, the forest silent. A single generation would carry the weight of countless erased stories. This is not speculation. It is written into our DNA, into the patterns of inheritance that echo across continents. The lost epoch is not one event. It is many. A series of erasures, a series of human endings, followed by new beginnings. Each bottleneck marks a chapter of history, wiped clean and rewritten. And that is why our deep past feels empty. Because only a fraction of humanity's earliest knowledge survived these narrow passages. The rest is gone forever. Yet something else remains. A quiet truth that hums beneath the surface. Despite unimaginable losses, humanity continued, carrying only fragments, piecing together new worlds from the shreds of old ones. We are the descendants of survivors, not of the strongest, nor of the most advanced, but simply of the most fortunate. The lost epochs remind us that survival itself is a kind of brilliance. Let us now walk into the next chamber of this forgotten world, a place where disappearance and emergence happened simultaneously. The first cities that left no names. Before Sumer, before Egypt, before the Indus Valley, before the Maya, there were settlements we barely understand, places where thousands of people lived together long before recorded history. We've uncovered hints, circular houses arranged in rings, communal hearths, massive storage pits, burial sites with carefully placed grave goods, complex trade networks that crossed hundreds of miles. These early settlements were not civilizations, as we define them, not states, not empires, not dynasties. They were experiments in community, experiments in living together at scales previously unknown. They had no writing, but they had social order, sharing systems, ceremonial practices, roles and responsibilities passed down through tradition. And then, in many places, they vanished. Not through war, not through catastrophe, not through collapse. They simply faded. People dispersed. Villages emptied. Structures decayed. Knowledge dissolved. Why? Climate shifts, resource pressures, internal changes, or perhaps the simple rhythm of human movement. Civilization is a fragile invention. It can vanish in a single generation without leaving a word behind. Imagine a settlement thriving for centuries during a mild climate, only for cold winds to return and food sources to shrink. The people leave. The memories leave. Nature reclaims the land. And 10,000 years later, archaeologists uncover only a faint ring in the soil, a ghost of an entire way of life. These unnamed ancient towns are some of the most haunting parts of the lost epoch, because they show that humanity tried many forms of community before finding the patterns we know today. We often speak of first civilizations as if the path to cities was linear. It was not. It was trial and error, success and silence, emergence and disappearance. History remembers the winners. Archaeology remembers the survivors. The lost epoch remembers the experiments. And now, we walk to the quietest part of the entire journey, the point where the human past meets the edge of what can be known. The era before language had structure. We think of language as something eternal, a fixed part of being human. But language evolved. Not the ability to speak, that is ancient, but the ability to structure speech into complex systems. Grammar, tenses, syntax, metaphor, symbolism. Before this development, humans communicated through simpler forms: gesture, tone, rhythm, shared context. Imagine a world where people lived rich emotional lives, but did not have words for time, for abstraction, for memory, for philosophy. Imagine a world where communication was intimate and immediate, but limited in reach. We know such worlds existed because the traces are everywhere. Simple symbolism before complex art. Tool traditions before myth traditions. Burial practices before story cycles. These early expressions mark the dawn of the human mind. But the minds that created them left no written legacy. We can only reconstruct what they might have felt through the shadows of their traces. A carved line in bone, a rhythmic pattern on a rock, the tilt of a burial posture, the pigment smeared on a wall. These gestures are the first pages of human consciousness, pages without words, pages that time barely preserved. The lost epoch stretches far beyond memory, because language had not yet learned to hold memory in place. Without writing, stories dissolve. Without structure, ideas drift. Without preservation, culture fades like mist. The silence of those early millennia is not emptiness. It is the echo of thought before thought could be recorded. It is the dream of humanity before waking. Now, step back from all these scenes, the submerged shorelines, the burn layers, the migrations, the first experiments in settlement, the genetic bottlenecks, the emergence of structured language. As you look across these fragments, a deeper realization emerges. The lost epoch isn't one period. It is the ocean beneath all of history. History, as we know it, floats on a vast sea of forgotten lives. Every civilization emerged from that sea and returned to it. The lost epoch is not a mystery to be solved. It is a reminder that human existence is wider than memory, older than writing, and deeper than any timeline can truly express. And now, we turn to the next chapter, where the lost epoch intersects with known history, where the earliest myths, the oldest rituals, and the first sacred sites carry echoes of a world we barely understand. As we move deeper into the forgotten foundations of human time, you may feel a quiet shift, a sense that the past is no longer something distant, but something surrounding you, almost pressing gently against the present. Because now, we approach a threshold, the space where prehistory and history begin to overlap, where the silence gives way to the first murmurs of organized memory, where the lost epoch touches the earliest rituals, the first sacred structures, and the beginnings of myth. To understand this threshold, imagine a valley at dawn. The air is cold. Mist gathers low to the ground. Birdsong filters gently through the trees. In the center of this valley stands a circle of stones, some fallen, some leaning, some still upright. They're not arranged randomly. They form patterns, geometric, astronomical, symbolic. But there is no writing, no inscriptions, no names, no dates. Only stones, only intention, only silence. This is the world of the first sacred sites, monuments built by people whose language we do not know, whose stories we cannot read, whose beliefs left no scripture. Yet the stones speak indirectly, not through words, but through alignment. They face the sunrise on solstices. They frame the moon at its extremes. They echo patterns found across distant regions. And so we begin to realize, even when history was silent, meaning was not. The lost epoch was not a void. It was an age of intention, a time when humanity expressed ideas through architecture, ritual, movement, and shared gatherings. These early monuments, long predating writing, are the first visible fingerprints of human consciousness, reaching beyond immediate survival. Let's walk slowly through some of these places, not to claim answers, but to feel their presence. Göbekli Tepe, a temple older than memory. High on a hill in southeastern Turkey lies a sanctuary older than agriculture, older than pottery, older than villages. Göbekli Tepe was built around 11,000 years ago, before humans settled into permanent towns. This alone defies expectation. We once assumed religion followed settlement, that grand monuments required stable societies. But here, in the soft light of prehistory, we find the opposite. People gathered to build something sacred before they built homes. Massive T-shaped stones, carved with foxes, lions, birds, snakes, abstract symbols, arranged in circles, standing like silent guardians. No writing, no clear purpose, no definitive narrative. Yet the site speaks in its own quiet way, through scale, through organization, through the effort required to shape, transport, and position the stones. It suggests ritual, it suggests gathering, it suggests memory, but memory expressed physically, not verbally. Archaeologists can only infer so much. But what Göbekli Tepe really reveals is that the lost epoch was not simple. It was capable of complexity long before recorded civilization. It was imaginative, symbolic, cooperative, and spiritually expressive. This challenges every assumption about humanity's earliest chapters. And it raises a deeper question. How many Göbekli Tepes did the earth swallow? How many sacred sites collapsed before stone was used? Wood rots, earth mounds level. Symbols carved into clay dissolve in rain. Entire ritual landscapes vanish with the shifting seasons. Göbekli Tepe survived because it was buried deliberately, a rare act of preservation in an age where nothing else was saved. It is a single surviving paragraph from an entire book of forgotten ritual. The first myths without words. Now, let's drift further into the early spiritual mind. Long before written religion, people created stories to explain the world. Why the seasons changed, why the stars moved, why shadows frightened them, why life ended, why dreams felt real, why thunder shook the earth, why rivers flooded without warning. These stories were not written, but they shaped identity as powerfully as scripture. And although the words are lost, the shapes of these myths echo faintly in later traditions. Across continents, we find shared archetypes: the great flood, the trickster who disrupts order, the mother who births the world, the hero who descends into darkness, the cosmic serpent, the ancestral spirits who shaped the land, the duality of chaos and creation. These themes appear in indigenous Australian songlines, in African oral traditions, in Arctic legends, in Native American stories, in the myths of the Mediterranean, in the Vedic hymns of India, in the early Sumerian epics. The cultures were separated by oceans, by millennia, by language, by circumstance. But the archetypes resonate, not because a single origin existed, but because human imagination is shaped by similar experiences. Birth and death, night and day, storm and drought, fear and comfort, the unknown. These were the teachers of the lost epoch. And myth was the memory system, a way to preserve wisdom before writing was born. If we could hear those ancient voices, we might discover that early humans carried deep philosophical insights in forms too subtle for archaeology to detect. Not advanced technology, not forgotten sciences, but emotional truths, reflections on existence that resonate even now. Memory turns to myth. Myth later turns to symbol. Symbol eventually turns to scripture. But the oldest layer, the spoken layer, is almost entirely gone. It existed for tens of thousands of years and left almost nothing behind, except echoes, faint as breath, fragile as smoke, persistent as longing. The first forgotten calendars. Let the scene change again. Imagine a mountain ridge where early humans watched the sky carefully, not for superstition, but for survival. They tracked the longest day, the shortest day, the turning of seasons, the cycles of the moon, the migration of stars. These were not astronomers in our modern sense. They were observers, patient, attentive, living in a world where survival depended on understanding nature's rhythms. Some carved simple notches in bone or antler to mark the passing of days. Some arranged stones to track the sunrise. Some watched the sky so consistently that they recognized patterns that spanned generations. These were the first calendars, not made of paper, but of landscape and memory. And here lies another quiet truth. Long before complex civilizations, humans mastered time. But mastery leaves fragile traces. Bones crack, sticks rot, symbols fade. Stone circles collapse under the weight of centuries. Yet scattered across the world, archaeologists find hints. Lunar tally marks, older than most religions, carved spirals aligned with equinoxes, stone rows pointing to midsummer sunrise, notched artifacts tracking moon cycles, ancient engravings mapping star clusters. These discoveries prove that the lost epoch was filled with observers of the sky, people who found meaning in the turning heavens. But just as with myth, the details of their systems are gone. We know they tracked cycles. We know they used the heavens as a calendar. We know they aligned their structures with celestial events. But we don't know why. Was it ritual, agriculture, migration, spiritual belief? A mix of all these? We see the shapes, we feel the intention, but the meaning remains just out of reach, not lost in catastrophe, lost in time. The first tools of memory. Now let us look at something deceptively simple, artifacts that seem like toys, or decorations, or random carvings, small objects that traveled with people for reasons we cannot fully interpret. Some may have been charms, some may have been storytelling aids, some may have been teaching tools, some may have been ritual markers. These early objects, made of bone, antler, wood, clay, carry the first hints of symbolic memory. They are the ancestors of writing. Before cuneiform, before hieroglyphs, before alphabetic scripts, humans used physical objects to anchor meaning. A carved bead might have represented a person. A painted pebble might have marked a story. A patterned shell might have symbolized a journey. A knotted cord might have recorded a lineage. A decorated bone might have mapped a ritual cycle. But none of these systems were preserved fully. They remain tantalizing fragments, the vocabulary of a language we can no longer speak. And so the lost epoch lingers at the edge of comprehension. Present, but unreadable. Visible, but unintelligible. As if we are standing in a room filled with ancient whispers we can no longer interpret. The mystery of cultural memory. All these threads, the stone circles, the early rituals, the myths, the calendars, the symbolic objects, point towards something profound. Long before history, humanity had culture. Rich culture, complex culture, deeply meaningful culture. But culture without writing dies quickly. It is passed down from voice to voice, from elder to youth, from ritual to gathering. And all it takes is one missing generation for the chain to break. When archaeologists uncover the silent remains of ancient settlements, they are not seeing the absence of culture. They are seeing the absence of preservation. Culture was there. It lived fully. It flourished. It shaped lives. But it left so little behind. This is the essence of the lost epoch. Humanity lived richly, but memory lived poorly. We are not uncovering a primitive past. We are uncovering a forgotten one. A past filled with ingenuity that we cannot decipher. A past filled with meaning that we cannot translate. A past filled with rituals that we cannot reconstruct. A past filled with voices that we can no longer hear. And yet, somehow, the shape of their world still touches ours. Their myths echo in ours. Their symbols reappear globally. Their understandings of sky and season form the foundations of modern calendars. Their survival strategies shape our basic instincts. Their movements became our migrations. Their dreams became our stories. To explore the lost epoch is to explore our own foundations. Not to uncover wonders of forgotten technology, but to rediscover the quiet brilliance of human beings navigating a world without certainty. In the next chapter, we will push deeper into abrupt endings, mysterious disappearances, and civilizations that rose and fell without leaving names. Let your mind settle again, as if you are sinking slowly beneath the surface of a calm, ancient lake. The water is cool, the world is quiet, and as you descend, light fades in soft gradients, from gold to jade to blue to darkness. This is what it feels like to journey into the forgotten chapters of humanity. A descent into layers where history no longer shines brightly, but glows faintly in scattered fragments. And now we arrive at a region where the silence becomes sharp, where civilizations leave only the edges of their stories, where disappearance itself becomes the mystery. Civilizations that vanished without names. Before the empires we know, before Sumer, before Egypt, before China, before the Indus Valley, there were cultures so old that even their ruins feel like whispers. Some lasted centuries, some lasted far longer. And then they dissolved. Not into legends, not into myth, not into chronicles. They dissolved into the earth. Let us stand at one such place, a windswept plateau, a forgotten ridge, a valley where the soil contains faint traces of hearths extinguished thousands of years ago. Archaeologists dig carefully, brushing away dust to reveal a small circle of stones, once the foundation of a dwelling. Nearby lie fragments of pottery with patterns that resemble no later culture. A burial lies beyond, the bones arranged in a posture that suggests ritual. But there are no writings, No metal tools, no monumental architecture. Only the quiet shape of lives whose names the world never learned. Thousands of such sites exist across the planet, not lost civilizations, but lost communities, lost cultural lineages, lost worlds. They tell a haunting truth. Human history is not the story of a few great civilizations. It is the story of countless forgotten ones. The civilizations we celebrate, Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, the Maya, Greece, are survivors. Not the first, not the most innovative, just the ones who left records that endured. Imagine how many systems of society existed long before these famous powers. How many belief systems flourished. How many languages filled the air. How many attempts at community were made and remade long before writing caught up. These are not the civilizations lost through cataclysm, but the civilizations lost through time. And perhaps this is more haunting. They did not fail. They simply faded. People moved on. Climate shifted. Resources thinned. Populations relocated. Traditions dissolved. New ideas replaced old ones. The earth covered their traces, as gently as a blanket over a sleeping child. Nothing dramatic. Nothing catastrophic. Just quiet endings. And quiet endings rarely leave stories behind. Let us journey deeper into one of the most mysterious disappearances of all, one that archaeologists have studied for decades, yet still cannot fully explain. The Neolithic collapse. Around 3200 BCE, long before the pyramids, long before Stonehenge was finished, communities across the Near East and Europe experienced abrupt changes. In some regions, villages emptied almost overnight. Pottery styles changed suddenly. Burial customs shifted dramatically. Long-lived settlements were abandoned. Trade networks went silent. Symbolic traditions vanished. Why? Archaeologists propose many possibilities: climate pressure, crop failure, disease, conflict, cultural transformation, migration, internal social change. But no single cause explains it all. The disappearance was too widespread, too varied, too uneven. It wasn't a collapse, it was a transformation, a cultural turning of the page, a sudden reorganization of how people lived, what they valued, how they expressed identity. Imagine a family living in a settlement for dozens of generations. One day, they decide to leave. Not flee, simply leave. They walk into forests or mountains, or valleys beyond the horizon. Their traditions evolve, their rituals shift, their pottery takes a new shape, their burial rites adopt new symbolism. Within 2 generations, the old ways are forgotten. Archaeologists, finding only the abandoned structures, ask, what happened here? But the truth may be simpler. Nothing happened. People changed. Humanity is not static. It sheds old skins. It reshapes itself. Entire cultural identities can dissolve in a single century. And so, the Neolithic collapse is not a tragedy. It is a reminder. Cultures breathe. They expand and contract, and sometimes exhale themselves into new forms. History records the expansions. Prehistory reveals the contractions. And the lost epoch is filled with both. Now let us walk into the next corridor, the mystery of the megalith builders. The megalithic enigma across Europe. From the coast of Portugal to the Scottish Isles, from Scandinavia to the Mediterranean, stand thousands of stone monuments older than pyramids. Dolmens, menhirs, circles, passage tombs, standing stones, alignments, massive chambers built with slabs weighing dozens of tons. What we do know is astonishing. These structures predate metal tools. Many align with solstices and equinoxes. Some contain acoustic resonance chambers. Their construction required engineering skill. They often sit atop older ritual sites. They form networks across vast distances. They appear suddenly, as if the knowledge spread rapidly over thousands of miles. But what we don't know is even more profound. Who built them? Why they were built? What rituals were performed there? How knowledge traveled so far, so fast? Why the tradition ended? What beliefs guided their construction? The megalith builders left no writing, no inscriptions, no explicit clues. Their memory was carried in oral tradition that did not survive the centuries. The structures remain, but their cultural meaning is gone. Not erased, gone. As if a world of symbolic knowledge melted away before writing could preserve it. And yet, standing among these stones, even today, you feel something. A quiet gravity, a sense of presence, a whisper of purpose. It reminds us that the lost epoch was not empty of meaning, only empty of records. Humanity was thinking deeply, feeling deeply, expressing itself in stone when writing was still unborn. The megaliths are not mysteries because they are supernatural. They are mysteries because their makers belong to worlds we cannot reconstruct. Worlds whose beliefs, whose rituals, whose identities lived only in memory, and memory vanished with its carriers. Now, step into a darker, quieter corridor, a place where we confront one of the strangest enigmas of ancient time, the sudden disappearance of early innovation. Across the world, in different epochs, we see a pattern, a burst of creativity. Tools become more refined, art grows more expressive, trade networks expand, rituals become more complex. Then, everything stops. For centuries, sometimes millennia. Why? Climate? Possibly. Resource shifts? Maybe. Population changes? Likely. Cultural drift? Almost certain. But there is something deeper here. Innovation requires memory, and memory requires continuity. Continuity is fragile. A single event, a drought, a migration, a conflict, a disease, can interrupt a chain of knowledge that took thousands of years to develop. If a craftsperson dies before teaching their apprentice, a technique disappears. If a ritual leader is lost before passing on a tradition, a belief evaporates. If a community relocates before rebuilding their old structures, a symbolic system collapses. Innovation is not just invention, it is inheritance, and inheritance breaks easily. The lost epoch is filled with broken inheritances, not because ancient people failed, but because memory is fragile when it is carried in the mind instead of in writing. This is how entire traditions disappear without leaving a trace. It is not spectacular, it is not dramatic, it is not exotic, it is human, it is simple, it is the quiet reality of ancient life. Now, step with me into the next chamber, one filled not with silence, but with questions. Questions that emerge from the thin line between prehistory and history, the first cities that shouldn't exist. As we approach the dawn of written history, we encounter sites that challenge our assumptions. Jericho, older than any known city, yet rebuilt repeatedly over thousands of years. Çatalhöyük, a dense settlement with no streets, no public buildings, and houses entered from rooftops. The Indus Valley, with advanced drainage systems and city planning, but no readable script. Caral in Peru, featuring pyramids older than the Incan civilization. Nabta Playa, a stone circle in the Sahara built before the desert formed. Each one appears suddenly, fully developed, with no earlier transition stage, as if the blueprint of civilization emerged unexpectedly. But this is an illusion. These cities did not appear suddenly. The cultures behind them had long, rich histories, histories that are lost, histories that developed in the lost epoch, histories of experimentation, organization, migration, tradition, none of which left records. Civilization feels sudden because the darkness behind it is immense, like stars appearing when the horizon of night rises. The cities are the stars. The lost epoch is the rising darkness that concealed the long dawn. The next chapter will guide us deeper into that dawn. into the quiet centuries before writing, into the emergence of identity, into the transition from oral memory to recorded history. As we step deeper into humanity's forgotten dawn, a soft realization begins to take shape. The closer we move toward written history, the stranger the world becomes. Not clearer, stranger. Because writing did not suddenly appear in a world ready for it. Writing emerged into a world that was already ancient, layered with traditions, rituals, symbols, and identities that no longer exist. To understand history, we must understand this crucial truth. Writing did not create civilization. Writing recorded the final echo of civilizations that had already lived for thousands of years. Most of what writing captured was not a beginning, but the end of something older. Tonight, we step into that twilight zone, the strange, delicate place between prehistory and memory. A place where humanity learned to trap thoughts in symbols so they would no longer drift away like smoke. A place where the lost epoch comes closest to the surface. Let us begin there. The first words were not stories. Imagine you are one of the first humans to press a symbol into clay. Your fingers tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the recognition that you are doing something irreversible. Before this moment, all your people's knowledge lived in breath, spoken, sung, danced, chanted, memorized. Memory was alive. Memory was fragile. Now, with a single mark, you have created something new. A thought detached from the thinker. A message freed from the body. A meaning that can survive after the voice is gone. But what do you write? Not myth, not law, not history. You write grain, goat, harvest, tribute, ownership. The first words humans ever wrote were not stories. They were numbers, labels, inventories, tallies. Writing began as accounting, a practical tool to keep track of resources in growing settlements. The earliest tablets from Sumer are simple marks. A wedge for grain, a stroke for quantity. No poetry, no creation mythology, no philosophical insight, just records of ordinary life. This tells us something profound. Humanity lived with myth, philosophy, and memory long before writing recorded them. Writing did not capture the beginning of civilization. It captured the moment when civilization became too large for spoken memory alone. It was a solution to complexity, not a spark of invention. And everything older than that complexity remains hidden in the lost epoch. Before words, there was the storyteller. Let the scene shift gently. Imagine an ancient night lit by a fire's orange glow. A group sits in a circle. Children listen. Elders speak. The storyteller begins. There is no script, no parchment, no ink, only breath and rhythm. Every gesture matters. Every pause holds weight. Every phrase has been shaped by countless generations. The storyteller is not inventing the tale. They are carrying it. This is how humanity remembered before writing. Memory lived in the body, in movement, in tone, in repetition, in ritual. This is why myths survived longer than facts. Myths were performed. Facts were spoken. Performance endures. Speech fades. Some of the earliest stories we know, the great floods, the world trees, the underworld journeys, the celestial battles, may have origins older than any written language. Not literal histories, but symbolic memories from the lost epoch. Stories shaped by landscapes and climates, and fears and hopes that archaeology alone cannot decode. What we read today in written myths is only the final layer of narratives that were old before cities existed. And beneath those layers sit memories from times so ancient we cannot comprehend their scale. When we read a myth today, we are not reading the original story. We are reading the fossil of a story, compressed, transformed, and fossilized over thousands of years. Just as stone preserves ancient creatures, myth preserves ancient thought. But the living world from which those myths emerged is lost. And that lost world is the lost epoch. The first cities were not alone. Now imagine we stand on a high ridge at twilight, overlooking the glow of an ancient settlement. Homes clustered together, smoke rising softly, animals penned for night, people gathered in courtyards, songs drifting through the dusk. This is not Sumer, not Egypt, not the Indus. This city is older, older than kings, older than dynasties, older than temples, older than bronze. The world pictures ancient civilization as beginning with Sumer, but fragments of older settlements tell a different story. Mud brick towns built millennia before writing, communities with organized layouts, public spaces, ritual structures, trade networks spanning hundreds of miles. These early cities did not call themselves civilizations. They simply lived, they organized, they traded, they worshipped, they raised families, they buried their dead with care and ritual. Their stories are not recorded in tablets or inscriptions or chronicles. They are recorded in soil patterns, ash layers, tool deposits, burial customs, animal bones, pollen samples, and the faint geometry of vanished streets. Archaeologists reconstruct these worlds like puzzle solvers, with most pieces missing. And yet something remarkable emerges. Humanity built complexity long before it built history. Cities did not appear suddenly. They grew out of traditions that extended far into the lost epoch. Traditions we can sense, but cannot follow, to their origin. Civilization is not the beginning. Civilization is the midpoint. The beginning is gone. The invention of forgetting. Let us pause here and reflect on something uncomfortable. We talk about the lost epoch as if time erased it. But forgetting was also a human act. When writing emerged, it did not record everything. It recorded royal lineages, economic transactions, victories in war, religious decrees, legal agreements. It did not record the daily lives of ordinary people, the beliefs of small tribes, the wisdom of unnamed communities, the rituals of isolated groups, the knowledge of nomads, the heritage of peoples who never built monuments. Writing preserved what powerful societies valued. Everything else was left to dissolve. This creates a strange imbalance. The earliest history we possess is not humanity's story. It is the story of the people who had scribes. Everyone else, the vast majority, vanished into prehistory, even if they lived alongside literate civilizations. Their languages, gone. Their rituals, gone. Their sense of identity, gone. Their art, if it existed, gone. Their traditions, gone. Not because they were less human, not because they were less complex, but because memory was not preserved. The lost epoch is not only ancient, it continues deep into historical time. Even in the age of writing, most of humanity's experience was never written down. This is why the past feels uneven, bright in some places, dark in others. Not because darkness means emptiness, but because darkness means forgotten. The lost epoch is not a single vanished era. It is a condition created by the fragility of memory and the selectivity of writing. Only a small beam of light fell on the ancient world. Everything outside that beam became shadow. The dawn of recorded history is ablaze with silence. When writing became widespread, when kingdoms emerged, when empires rose, we might expect clarity. Instead, we encounter new silences. Entire cultures appear briefly, then vanish. Scripts emerge, then die without translation. Peoples move across continents, leaving no names behind. Artifacts appear, with no context and no descendants to explain them. It is as if the world was filled with voices that writing did not catch. Even in the Age of Kings, the lost epoch continued. The Bimak culture, gone. The Cucuteni Tripilia, gone. The Tartessians, gone. The Norte Chico, gone. The Liangzhu, gone. The Hattians, gone. The Jomon, faded into myth. The peoples of Göbekli Tepe, unknown forever. Civilization did not fill the silence. Civilization grew on top of it. The lost epoch is not the prelude to history, it is the ocean beneath it. And even as writing illuminated the peaks, the valleys remained dark. We have now reached a pivotal turning point in our journey. We stand at the edge of known history. Behind us lies the vast darkness of deep prehistory. Ahead of us lies the uncertain world of early civilizations that left more questions than answers. In the next chapter, we will enter the heart of what people call lost civilizations. Not mythical nations, not fantastical golden ages, but real, archaeologically grounded cultures that vanished, leaving behind only shadows. The forgotten builders of early monuments, the vanished peoples behind ancient scripts, the cultures erased by climate shifts, the societies swallowed by deserts and jungles, the regions lost beneath rising seas, the identities erased by conquest, none the knowledge buried beneath cities we still inhabit today. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders loosen. Allow the world around you to fade until the only thing that exists is this quiet journey into forgotten time. Because now we arrive at the region where imagination and archaeology meet. Not through fantasy, but through evidence that refuses to explain itself fully. We often think of lost civilizations as dramatic mysteries, as vanished golden ages, as advanced cultures swallowed by cataclysm. But the truth is subtler, stranger, and more human. Civilizations do not vanish because they are mythical. They vanish because the world is fragile, and memory even more so. Tonight, we walk into the real lost civilizations, those whose ruins remain, but whose stories have dissolved. The forgotten builders of the Sahara. Long before the Sahara was a desert, it was alive. Not figuratively, literally. Rivers flowed through wide valleys. Grasslands stretched across the landscape. Lake basins held water deep and clear. Animals roamed, crocodiles, elephants, giraffes, cattle, hippos, in ecosystems flourishing for thousands of years. And humans lived there. They fished from rivers that no longer exist. They painted animals on stone walls that today sit in barren stretches of endless sand. They built settlements in regions where life is impossible now. This was the Green Sahara, a world forgotten because climate erased it so completely. When drought returned, when the rains weakened, when grasslands shrank, the peoples of the Sahara moved on. Some became the early ancestors of North African cultures. Some moved south into West Africa. Some migrated toward the Nile, changing its history forever. But the cultures of the Green Sahara, their languages, their identities, their mythologies, are gone. All that remains are silent paintings of animals that should not be in a desert. Each figure a ghost from a time when the Sahara was a paradise. The people who built Medum before Egypt. In Egypt, most people think civilization began with the Old Kingdom, the pyramids of Giza, the Sphinx, the first dynasties. But beneath those famous layers lie older foundations, burial sites with unfamiliar styles, tools not matching later Egyptian cultures, architectural fragments that belong to a symbolic system we cannot decode. There were people in Egypt before Egypt, people whose rituals were absorbed or overwritten by the rising dynasties. Their pottery patterns are unlike anything later. Their burial postures follow traditions that vanish suddenly. Their settlement structures do not resemble known Egyptian layouts. Archaeologists call them pre-dynastic cultures, a catch-all term for peoples whose real names have been erased by time. The builders of Merimda, the culture of Fayum, the Badarians, the Nakadans, and before even them, groups whose identities are completely unknown. Egypt did not rise alone. It rose on top of cultures that left memories written only in sand. The Indus people who left a script without a voice. Across the Indus Valley, modern Pakistan and northwest India, lies one of the world's earliest civilizations, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, Rakhigarhi. Sophisticated cities with drainage systems more advanced than Rome's. Urban planning that suggests remarkable social cohesion. Trade artifacts found as far away as Mesopotamia. But the most haunting part of the Indus civilization is not what they built. It's what they wrote. Hundreds of symbols, etched into seals, carved into pottery, inscribed on tools. A script that no one can read. Not because it is too complex, because it is too brief, too concise, too unlike any other writing system. The Indus people wrote, but not in a way that modern scholars can decipher. Their rituals, their kings or councils, their daily life, their stories, their concerns, their philosophies, all locked inside symbols whose keys were lost when the civilization disappeared. The Indus collapse is not a mystery of destruction, it is a mystery of silence. Their cities empty gradually, trade routes shift, river courses change, people disperse, and their script, their memories, fade into unreadable inscriptions, a lost civilization hidden in plain sight. The mysterious builders of South America, before the Inca. High in the Andes, long before the Inca rose to power, there were cultures so old their ruins feel like dreams. Chavin, Caral, Tiwanaku, the Norte Chico. Caral is older than the pyramids of Egypt. Tiwanaku built monoliths with geometric precision across a high-altitude desert that even modern engineers struggle with. But what they believed, how they organized themselves, why they built such complexity, gone. Their writings, if they had any, did not survive. Their stories dissolved into wind. Their identities buried beneath the civilizations that followed. The Inca inherited a landscape of ruins they could not explain. Even they looked at the older stonework and said, "These were built by the ones who came before us." They didn't know who, neither do we. Another layer of the lost epoch. The Jomon of Japan, 10,000 years with no chronology. The Jomon people lived in Japan long before agriculture reached the region. For nearly 10,000 years, they created pottery with patterns more intricate than some later empires. They built dwellings arranged in complex patterns. They carved statues with expressive faces. They practiced rituals still not understood, but they left no writing, no dates, no clear succession of eras, just layers upon layers of cultural sediment. Civilizations like this are more common than we realize. Long-lasting, complex, socially rich, culturally deep, yet entirely without records. The Jomon are a reminder that writing is not civilization. Monuments are not civilization. Empire is not civilization. Civilization is lived experience, and lived experience does not always survive. The people of the Amazon, who built cities hidden by trees. For centuries, the Western world believed the Amazon was a wilderness, untouched, primitive, empty of great societies. But the forest was hiding something. Beneath canopy and soil, archaeologists have found geometric earthworks visible only from the air, roads cut in perfect straight lines, raised causeways stretching miles, villages arranged in star-shaped patterns, domesticated forests carefully curated, regions cleared and replanted according to a plan. This was not wilderness, it was civilization woven into nature, a civilization that used the forest as architecture. When disease arrived, during European contact, diseases the indigenous world had no immunity to, the population collapsed. The forest returned so quickly that within generations, cities disappeared into green silence. It is not a legend. It is not speculation. It is not myth. It is evidence of a world erased by biology, not by war. Civilizations can vanish not because they collapse, but because the forest grows faster than memory. The mystery of cultures with no descendants. Some ancient cultures left artifacts, but no genetic or linguistic legacy. They simply ended, not violently, not abruptly. They ended because nothing carried them forward. They ended because their lineages merged with others or faded through time. They ended because identity is fragile, and when identity is fragile, history dissolves. These peoples become the shadows inside archaeology, tools without context, pottery without symbols, houses without language, burials without myths, not forgotten deliberately, forgotten naturally, because all memory eventually returns to silence. Now take a slow breath, because everything we have explored so far has been leading toward a single realization. Human history is not a single story. It is millions of stories, and most of them are gone. Not because they were less important, but because the world did not preserve them. Civilizations rise not because they are superior, but because they were fortunate. Civilizations fall not because they fail, but because time is relentless. The lost epoch is not a legend. It is the truth. A truth that every ruin reveals. A truth every burial whispers. A truth every stone circle hints at. Let your breathing soften. Let your body settle deeper into rest. As you listen, imagine you're walking through a vast, ancient landscape. A world shaped not only by human hands, but by forces so immense that they sculpted entire chapters of history without leaving explanations behind. Because now we reach the part of the story where humanity does not stand center stage, where nature, in its raw, indifferent power, rewrites the script without warning, where the lost epoch is not the result of forgetting, but the result of being erased. Throughout the deep past, there were moments when the human story was nearly torn apart. Volcanic winters, planetary cooling, megadroughts, monsoon collapses, flood pulses, ice sheet retreat, and abrupt shifts that transformed the world faster than cultures could adapt. And each time, civilizations dissolved into silence. Some gradually, some within the span of a single lifetime. Let us walk through those forgotten cataclysms, not in fear, but in wonder, because they reveal why so much of humanity exists in darkness, why entire ages vanished. The Toba eruption, the winter that nearly erased us. 74,000 years ago, a volcano in Indonesia tore itself apart. It was one of the largest eruptions in the last 2 million years. Ash covered continents, skies darkened, sunlight weakened, temperatures plummeted, plants died, animals suffered. Human populations shrank too, a fraction of their size. Some genetic studies suggest the bottleneck of this period left as few as a few thousand humans alive worldwide. Imagine that. Imagine a winter that lasted years, not months. Imagine a sky the color of stone dust for generations. Imagine listening quietly in a cave as elders whispered stories to keep hope alive, not knowing if more than a handful of people would survive. The survivors carried on. They restarted the world. But most of the memories of that ancient era died with those who perished. The Toba eruption did not just kill, it erased histories no one had written. It severed the threads of countless cultures. It reset humanity in ways we still struggle to comprehend. The lost epoch is not empty. It is full of stories that nature took back. The great megadroughts. After the Ice Age, as glaciers retreated and forests expanded, humanity flourished. Then climates shifted. For thousands of years, regions of Africa, Australia, the Levant, India, and the Americas suffered brutal megadroughts. Entire lakes vanished, rivers dried, grasslands became dust, animal migrations changed, food sources collapsed. People migrated in waves, not seeking opportunity, but running from starvation. Cultures broke apart as families split in desperate search of water. Nomadic groups abandoned old traditions that no longer fit a dying landscape. And somewhere in all of this, entire societies dissolved quietly. Archaeology finds the scattered footprints of these movements. Charred seeds from desperate harvests, abandoned hearths, dried wells, villages left mid-construction. But the names of the people who endured these droughts are gone. What they prayed for, how they adapted, what stories they told their children, all lost. Drought erases in slow motion, and in the lost epoch, slow erasure was the most common kind. The Younger Dryas, the return of cold. Around 12,800 years ago, as the world warmed after the Ice Age, the climate suddenly reversed. Temperatures plunged again within a single human lifetime. Animals died. Glaciers re-advanced. Vegetation shifted abruptly. Hunting patterns collapsed. Migration routes changed. Some archaeologists believe this sudden cooling triggered major cultural transformations. New tools, new rituals, new burial customs, new migration waves that reshaped continents. But most of what humans knew before that shift, their seasonal knowledge, their stories, their sacred places, became useless overnight. When the world changes, memory becomes obsolete, and obsolete memory is forgotten quickly. The Younger Dryas did not destroy civilization. It destroyed continuity. And without continuity, history evaporates. Flood pulses and the drowning of ancient coastlines. As the Ice Age ended, the oceans rose, not steadily, but in sudden pulses that drowned coastlines over and over again. These pulses erased villages, meeting grounds, ancient camps, ritual sites, fishing communities, trade routes. Imagine a family watching the sea creep closer each month. Imagine moving your home again and again, only to find the shoreline rising like fate. Imagine losing your grandparents' graves to the waves. Imagine abandoning the sacred place where your people gathered for centuries. The coastlines of the lost epoch now lie underwater, buried beneath silt on the continental shelves. Any stories written on those shores were washed away before writing existed. The sea is the greatest archivist and the greatest thief. Volcanic winters and forgotten famines. Throughout deep history, volcanoes sculpted human destiny in ways we barely understand. Santorini reshaped the Aegean, Ilopango reshaped the Maya, Kauai reshaped the Pacific, Rinjani reshaped medieval societies. Tens of other eruptions, smaller, scattered, lost to geology, reshaped prehistory in ways we will never decipher. A volcanic winter lasts long enough to kill stories. A decade of poor harvests erases more memory than a century of war. Because when survival becomes fragile, culture focuses on the immediate, food, shelter, warmth, and lets deeper traditions slip away. Famine does not destroy humanity, it destroys memory. And memory is the only thread connecting us to the past. Break that thread once, and an entire culture can disappear in a generation. Break it twice, and history forgets that culture existed at all. Mass migrations that quietly rewrote the world. History often speaks of migrations as singular events: Bantu expansions, Indo-European migrations, Austronesian voyages, the peopling of the Americas. But these events were not isolated waves. They were tsunamis of movement, lasting thousands of years. And each migration replaced, absorbed, or erased older cultures. Some groups were peaceful, some were not. But the result was the same. The languages of older peoples vanished. Their beliefs faded. Their rituals dissolved. Their identities were erased. Their stories were swallowed by the groups that replaced them. This process is not malicious. It is the quiet mathematics of human population. When new people arrive, older voices can disappear. And so many cultures, leaving no descendants, no written language, no songs, no myths, are lost forever. Not because they were weaker, not because they were less intelligent, not because they were primitive. They are gone because memory chose to keep other stories. History preserves what someone decided to write down. Prehistory preserves what the earth allowed to survive. Everything else dissolved into the vast, silent ocean of forgotten human time. The erasure of identity in conquered lands. Not all loss is natural, some is deliberate. When ancient empires expanded, Hittite, Assyrian, Akkadian, Egyptian, Chinese, Roman, they often rewrote the maps of language and belief. Conquered peoples were absorbed. Their gods were merged or outlawed, their languages suppressed, their names forgotten, their stories forgotten. The empire's language became the language of memory. The empire's narrative became the narrative of history, and cultures that refused to write their stories in the conqueror's script were erased. Some fought, some fled, some integrated, some vanished. And with each disappearance, the lost epoch grew. Not because the cultures lacked records, but because their conquerors destroyed them. Even scrolls burn easily. Clay tablets crack. Reed papyrus dissolves. Memory is fragile. Identity is fragile. And history, ironically, is the most fragile of all. Now take a slow breath. Let the quiet sink in. Because everything we've explored reveals a single truth. Humanity has survived more erasure than memory. We are the descendants of countless forgotten worlds. Civilizations lost to drought, cultures erased by migration, identities overwritten by conquest, rituals buried by forest and sea, languages dissolved by time, histories broken by catastrophe. The human story is not a long, continuous line. It is a chain with missing links. Why humanity forgets, even when nothing is destroyed. How knowledge fades, not from catastrophe, but from the quiet churn of time. How memory transforms into myth. How myth transforms into symbol. How symbol transforms into silence. Settle in again. Feel the quiet return, as if the world around you is dimming to a soft candle glow. We have walked through catastrophes, through volcanic winters, droughts, migrations, and the quiet erasure of civilizations. But now we enter a different realm. A realm where nothing dramatic happens, where no eruption clouds the sky, no empire rises, no army marches, no sea floods the land. A realm where life continues quietly, ordinarily, predictably, and yet memory still dissolves. Cultures still vanish, knowledge still fades, stories still evaporate, not through destruction, but through time. Time alone is enough to erase almost everything. And in this quiet erasure, we discover perhaps the most haunting mystery of the lost epoch. Humanity forgets far more through peace than through catastrophe. Let's walk gently into that truth. The erosion of knowledge is natural. Imagine you learn a skill from someone you admire, a method of weaving, a way to treat illness, a technique for carving wood. You practice it, you refine it, you pass it on to your children. But your children live in different times. Perhaps the climate warms and wool becomes scarce. Perhaps a new plant is discovered that heals more effectively. Perhaps new tools replace the old ones. And without meaning to, without noticing, without even thinking about it, they stop passing the skill on. A single generation is enough for an entire tradition to disappear. 2 generations makes it. seem as if it never existed. 3 generations, and not even the memory remains. This is the simplest mechanism of cultural loss. Not catastrophe, not violence, not collapse, just life. People adapting, improving, forgetting the old as they embrace the new. And time carries those lost traditions out to sea, like driftwood. The disappearance of languages. Language is the container of memory. When a language dies, an entire worldview dies with it. Today, linguists estimate that half of the world's languages will disappear within the next 50 years. And these languages are not ancient, they are spoken now. What does that mean for the languages of 10,000 years ago? 20,000? 50,000? Imagine how many ways of seeing the world have dissolved. How many metaphors, how many cultural categories, how many words for plants, stars, rituals, dreams. Language shapes thought. If a language disappears, thought disappears with it. The lost epoch is not just the loss of archaeology, it is the loss of minds that thought in ways we can no longer imagine. Not because their languages were primitive, but because every language is a universe, and most of those universes have gone dark. The quiet death of oral traditions. Before writing, stories survived through performance. A storyteller carried the knowledge of their people. They memorized genealogies, rituals, laws, narratives, cosmologies, songs, the secrets of forests, the patterns of the sky. But memory is a fragile archive. A single missing storyteller breaks the chain. A single migration interrupts the pattern. A single famine thins the population until only the young remain, and they do not know what the elders knew. Oral tradition is like a candle flame, beautiful, illuminating, warm, but easily extinguished. And when a flame goes out, the darkness it leaves can stretch across millennia. Millions of stories burned quietly away in the lost epoch. Not through fire, but through forgetfulness, the natural drift of human culture. Imagine a game of storytelling, played in a long line of people. One person whispers a tale to another, and that person passes it on, and so on. By the 5th person, details change. By the 10th, the story shifts dramatically. By the 20th, it becomes entirely new. Now imagine this happening across 10,000 years, across migrations, across language changes, across generations so distant they cannot recognize the ancestors' world. Story becomes myth. Myth becomes symbol. Symbol becomes ritual. Ritual becomes vague shape. Shape becomes silence. This is not tragedy. It is evolution. Culture is not preserved. Culture is lived. And in living, it transforms. In transforming, it forgets. The lost epoch is simply the natural consequence of being human. Knowledge fades when it stops being needed. Think of all the skills that humans once depended on. Tracking animals in fresh snow, identifying edible roots, reading stars for navigation, creating fire in rain, mapping freshwater sources, predicting monsoon shifts. These skills shaped cultures for thousands of years. But when agriculture emerged, many became unnecessary. When cities grew, others became obsolete. When metal tools replaced stone, entire crafts disappeared. The lost epoch is filled with expertise that died because the world changed. Not because it was inferior, because it was specific to an environment that no longer exists. Knowledge adapts to the present. The past is forgotten by design. The disappearance of sacred places. Some of the earliest sacred sites were not stone circles or temples. They were landscapes: a waterfall, a hilltop, a clearing, a cave, a river mouth. Places where people felt something they could not explain. Places where they connected with ancestors, spirits, seasons, or simply the feeling that the world was alive. But sacredness is a cultural memory. If a community leaves the landscape, the meaning evaporates. A sacred hill becomes an ordinary hill. A holy spring becomes just water. A ritual cave becomes a hole in the earth. And the memory disappears with the people who held it. Archaeologists often find beautiful natural spaces with signs of ancient gatherings, fire marks, pigments, offerings, burials, but no explanation. The lost epoch is full of sacred places whose stories vanished because no one remained to remember. The fading of identities. Imagine a small group living in the mountains, a few hundred people with a rich identity, their own rituals, their own language, their own stories, their own sense of us. Then imagine another group arriving in the valley below. Trade begins, marriage follows, generations mix, cultures blend. Within a century, the mountain identity fades into the valley identity. Not violently, not tragically, quietly. A cultural snowflake melting into a stream. Now multiply this by tens of thousands of years. Cultures didn't have to collapse to disappear. They simply had to blend. Like colors mixing into shades the world no longer recognizes. The lost epoch is not a graveyard. It is a mosaic, but most of the tiles have fallen away. The absence of writing is not the absence of thought. Perhaps the most important truth of this entire journey is this: writing is young, thought is ancient. Humans imagined long before they inscribed. Humans explained the stars long before they recorded the sky. Humans practiced ritual long before they built temples. Humans understood psychology long before there was a word for it. The lost epoch was full of insight, interpretation, symbolism, philosophy, ritual, identity, art, emotion. What it lacked was permanence. Ideas lived in breath, not in ink, and breath does not last. We are not the pinnacle of human thought. We are merely the first to write it down. This realization softens the mystery of the lost epoch. It was not empty, it was full of lives, cultures, minds, and worlds, all of which time dissolved gently into silence. And now, as we move to the next stage of our long descent through forgotten ages, we will explore how myth became the memory system of the ancient world, how stories carried deeper truths than facts could preserve, how symbols passed wisdom across ages without writing, how the earliest civilizations inherited echoes from worlds long gone. Let your breath soften again, as if you're walking through a dim corridor, holding a candle in your hand. Beyond this point, the air changes. It feels thicker with ancient presence, heavier with memories that are not yours, quieter with thoughts older than recorded time. Because we are entering the realm where the lost epoch did not fully vanish. It transformed, not into history, not into archaeology. It transformed into something humanity carried forward even when everything else was forgotten. Myth, symbol, sacred story. These were the vessels that preserved small fragments of the world before writing. Even after landscapes shifted, languages died, and cultures dissolved. The earliest civilizations inherited these fragments without ever knowing their origins. They found pieces of older worlds and shaped them into new meanings. What survives of the lost epoch comes to us in symbolic form. Tonight, we step into those symbols. Myth, the memory that outlives time. Before writing, myth was the only tool humanity had to preserve meaning. Not facts, meaning. Facts vanish quickly. Meaning endures. When a people wanted to remember an ancient migration, they told a story of ancestors guided by stars. When they wanted to remember a catastrophic flood, they spoke of gods reshaping the world. When they wanted to remember a long drought, they told stories of serpents swallowing rivers. When they needed to preserve the wisdom of elders, they encoded it in tales of heroes, monsters, and journeys into the underworld. Myth was not literal. It was mnemonic, a way to keep memory alive beyond the reach of forgetting. So when we look at ancient myths today, in Sumer, in Egypt, in China, in India, in Greece, in the Americas, in Oceania, we are not reading fiction. We are reading transformed memory. Memory so old that its original context is unreachable. Myth is the bridge between the lost epoch and recorded history. But the bridge has cracks, and through those cracks we glimpse shadows of what was once known. The flood stories, echoes of a drowned world. Nearly every ancient culture has a story about a great flood. Not a small flood, a world-resetting flood. Sumer, the gods drown humanity to begin again. Hebrew tradition, waters cover the earth. India, Manu survives a cosmic deluge. Greece, Deucalion rides out a flood sent by Zeus. Native North American tribes, the earth swallowed by water. Aboriginal Australian groups, ancient seas rising to reclaim land. Pacific Islanders, stories of drowned homelands. These stories are not identical, yet they share a shape. Why? Because during the lost epoch, the world experienced centuries of rising seas, entire coastlines drowned, habitats vanished, human groups were displaced, collective memory shattered. The stories that survived inherited echoes of these events, but transformed them into symbolic language. The flood myths are not evidence of a global event. They are evidence of global forgetting, and global memory struggling to preserve a pattern. Somewhere behind the myths, the real drowned world of early humanity still lingers, not as fact, as metaphor, as memory turned to story. The underworld, memory of a world beneath ice. Cultures across the world tell stories of an underworld, a cold, dark, distant realm beneath the earth. The Sumerians called it Kur, the Greeks named it Hades, the Maya imagined Xibalba, the Egyptians mapped Duat, the Norse spoke of Hell. Indigenous Siberian cultures described layered worlds below. Why do so many myths have a place of cold darkness beneath the surface? Because for tens of thousands of years, humans lived beside glaciers and permanent ice sheets. The world beneath the glaciers would have been dark, silent, forbidding. A place where the sun never reached. A place where creatures vanished if they wandered too far. In the lost epoch, such places were real, not metaphysical. Over time, as climate warmed and glaciers retreated, memory of these deadly zones dissolved into myth. The underworld is not a supernatural invention. It is a cultural memory of a landscape that no longer exists. A message from ancestors who lived through icebound ages so alien that modern humans cannot visualize them without scientific models. Myth remembers after history forgets. The cosmic serpent, memory of rivers that disappeared. Across continents, ancient cultures tell stories about a great serpent. Rainbow serpents in Australia, Nagas in India, Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica, Jormungandr in Norse myth, dragons in China, water serpents in Africa, ancient snake spirits in North American tribes. These serpents almost always represent water, rivers, storms, floods, renewal, destruction. Why? Because during climatic shifts in the lost epoch, rivers often changed course dramatically, sometimes within a single generation. Whole communities lost their water sources. Others saw new rivers form after glacial melt. To ancient humans, a river was life. When a river vanished or changed course, it felt as if a giant creature had moved through the landscape, bringing both creation and destruction. The cosmic serpent is a memory of those transformations, a symbolic way to speak about a force far larger than human understanding. The world tree, memory of an ancient sky, from Scandinavia's Yggdrasil to the Maya ceiba tree, from Siberian shamanic traditions to the cosmic fig tree of India, from African cosmologies to indigenous American belief, the world tree appears everywhere. Why? Because in the lost epoch, before light pollution, the night sky was vivid beyond imagination. The Milky Way, seen clearly for thousands of years, resembled a tree, a bright trunk branching across the darkness. The ancestors interpreted it as a cosmic axis, a bridge between worlds, a map of existence, a place where souls traveled, a path for spirits. The world tree is a memory of the ancient sky, a sky so bright that the cosmos felt closer than mountains. Our modern sky is dim by comparison. The myths preserve what our eyes can no longer see. The Creator Twins, memory of migration. In many cultures, the Navajo, the Maya, the Greeks, the Zoroastrians, the Baltic peoples, we find myths of twin brothers who journey, fight, create, or establish order. Scholars do not see this as shared origin. They see it as a shared experience. Migrating groups often split, one branch moving forward, another remaining behind, or one group going east, another west. Twins in myth mirror the splitting of communities, the painful division of families in search of better land. Behind the stories, there is a quiet sorrow, the memory of separation passed down as a symbolic tale. The lost epoch was filled with such migrations, driven by drought, climate, animals, forests, seas. Myth carries the emotional truth long after the practical reasons were forgotten. Myth as the last survivor of forgotten worlds. By the time writing emerged, in Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, the myths were already ancient. The myths we read today are not the originals. They are the descendants of stories that existed for thousands of years before writing ever touched a surface. A myth written in 2000 BCE might preserve the shell of a story from 7000 BCE or older. This is why ancient myths feel both familiar and enigmatic. They are fragments from worlds that writing never saw, worlds that archaeology barely touches, worlds that the earth mostly swallowed. We cannot reconstruct them fully, but we can feel their presence in the patterns of story. The mythic age is the shadow of the lost epoch, and shadows are often more revealing than light. Symbols that outlive civilizations. As we move further toward recorded history, something remarkable happens. Symbols appear that have no known origin. Geometric patterns, spirals, cycles, triangles, circles, crossed lines, knots, animals stylized in particular ways. These symbols show up in Neolithic temples, in pottery from distant cultures, in cave chambers, in ancient textiles, in rock carvings, in early shrines. And some remain into later civilizations: Egyptian ankh, Sumerian rosettes, Harappan seals, Celtic spirals, Chinese. Cloud motifs. Mesoamerican geometric art. No one knows where these symbols started. They appear globally, too early to be connected through trade, and yet their shapes align. Some believe these are universal expressions of human psychology. Some believe they reflect natural patterns: sunlight, water, spirals of shells, branches of trees. Some believe they carry echoes of a symbolic language that predates writing. Whatever the case, they are the closest thing we have to the worldview of the lost epoch. The symbols survived, the meanings did not. Memory outlives fact. As we leave this symbolic realm, one truth becomes clear. Myth remembers when history forgets. Symbols endure when cultures vanish. Ritual persists when languages die. Emotion survives when facts decay. The lost epoch did not vanish. It transformed. It seeped into myths, embedded itself in symbols, wrapped itself in rituals, threaded itself through stories, camouflaged itself in the earliest written texts. The ancient world always looked backward, because it could sense there was something behind it, something vast, something meaningful, something unknowable. And that unknowable realm is what we call the lost epoch. In the next segment, we will follow these symbols into the dawn of recorded history, to see how early civilizations built their identities on top of half-forgotten worlds. Settle again into the quiet. Let the tones soften. Let the air grow still around you, as if the past itself is drawing a gentle breath. Because now, we move from the symbolic world into the first civilizations, the places where writing finally appeared, where memory was preserved in clay, where architecture reached toward the sky, and where humanity took its first steps into the realm of recorded history. But even here, in the glow of the world's earliest cities, the lost epoch did not disappear. It lingered. It shaped. It whispered. The first civilizations were not fresh beginnings. They were continuations, the last chapters of much older stories whose early pages were lost to time. If you imagine human history as a long book, the first civilizations appear not on page 1, but on page 300. Everything before was torn out. And yet, traces remain in the margins, in the symbols, in the myths, in the rituals that early civilizations adopted without knowing their origins. Tonight, we walk through those early cities, listening carefully to the echoes of forgotten worlds that shaped them. Mesopotamia, a civilization standing on shadows. Mesopotamia is often called the cradle of civilization, but any archaeologist will tell you the truth. Mesopotamia began already carrying traditions it did not invent. The first Sumerians wrote in symbols whose origins are older than their cities. Their myths of floods, of divine councils, of ancient cycles, bear the texture of stories far older than the cities themselves. Take the Sumerian king list. It begins with rulers who reigned for thousands of years. Not literal rulers, but inherited memory of an age before time. Why did the Sumerians imagine an ancient world stretching back into impossible antiquity? Because they sensed what we now know. Civilization did not begin with them. It was simply the first to carve memory into clay. And clay preserves only what is written, not what is known. Behind Sumer lay thousands of years of unrecorded cultures, complex, evolving, myth-making. The Sumerians inherited shards of those cultures, symbols they could not explain, rituals whose meanings were unclear, stories whose origins were lost, stars whose positions were tracked long before writing existed. The city of Uruk, one of humanity's first major cities, rose not from emptiness, but from a long tradition of settlement, trade, ritual, and storytelling that archaeology can only trace faintly. Civilization did not start here. It surfaced here, like a mountain peak emerging from fog, the fog being the lost epoch. Ancient Egypt, a kingdom built on forgotten foundations. When we imagine Egypt, we picture pyramids, temples, hieroglyphs, pharaohs. But Egypt rose suddenly, too suddenly, for its complexity to be spontaneous. The earliest dynasties already had elaborate religious systems, advanced burial practices, architectural precision, royal iconography, specialized crafts, complex calendars, established myth cycles. None of these appear abruptly. without precedent. So where was the precedent? In cultures older than Egypt itself. Pre-dynastic rituals involve symbols that do not reappear later, suggesting they were inherited from cultures even earlier. Burial sites show practices that evolved for centuries before the first kings unified the Nile. Some elements, the falcon god, the serpent goddess, the worship of Zep Tepi, the first time, may reflect memories of an ancient symbolic system far older than writing. When Egyptians spoke of the first time, they were not describing history. They were describing a memory of a memory, the echo of the lost epoch beneath their civilization. Their earliest texts speak of a world already ancient by the time writing arrived, a world we cannot access except through obscured symbolism. Egypt may be the most visible, ancient civilization, but beneath its written beauty lies a vast, silent foundation built from forgotten worlds. The Indus Valley, organization without a voice. We know the Indus Valley civilization was advanced. Urban planning, drainage, trade, craftsmanship. Yet they left no decipherable script. Everything about them, their beliefs, their rituals, their political systems, is silent. And the silence hides something fascinating. Their cities appear already complex, already organized, already structured. They do not show a clear developmental path, which means the Indus Valley likely inherited traditions from cultures before them, now eroded beyond recognition. Their symbols, the horned figure, the seated yogic posture, the water buffalo, the mother goddess, seem older than the civilization itself. Archaeologists suspect deep cultural roots stretching far into the Neolithic, but the roots are invisible, buried under thousands of years of quiet erosion. The Indus script, still undeciphered, may preserve fragments of the lost epoch in symbol form. But without the key, the story remains sealed. A civilization built on memory, yet unable to speak it. China, the forgotten cultures beneath the dynasties. When Chinese dynastic history begins, it begins strong. Settled agriculture, bronze technology, ritual vessels, ancestor worship, cosmology, astronomy. But this does not appear out of emptiness. It appears out of loss. Before the Shang dynasty wrote oracle bones, there were cultures with pottery so refined that their craftsmanship rivals later dynasties. There were villages with burial systems that suggest social structure. And yet, these earlier peoples have no names. Their language is unknown, their beliefs unknown, their identity dissolved completely. The dynasties inherited shamanic practices, ritual patterns, lunar observations, seasonal cycles, all older than writing. China's oldest recorded myths, Nuwa, Pangu, the Great Flood, feel like echoes of far older stories, stories shaped in the lost epoch. And when writing finally emerged, it merely captured the final ripples of vast ancient cultural oceans. The dawn of recorded religion, echoes of an older world. The earliest written religions did not invent belief. They inherited it. The Sumerian gods have traits so ancient that scholars can only speculate on their prehistoric origins. Egyptian deities carry symbols older than the pyramids. The Rig Veda may contain hymns that were spoken for thousands of years before they were written. Chinese cosmology derives from patterns observed long before writing. Greek myths retain hints of older rituals from forgotten European cultures. Mesoamerican cosmology contains traces of vanished Andean and Amazonian traditions. Every early religion is a shadow of something older, a memory of the lost epoch. Religion did not begin in temples. It began in landscapes, in the sky, in forests. in caves, in the turning of seasons, in the cycles of sun and moon, in the thunder of storms, in the pulse of time. And the earliest civilizations took these inherited fragments and shaped them into systems they could record. But the origin behind the systems, the world before myth, remains unreachable. Because myth is already a translation of memories from a world we can no longer fully access. The first kings ruled with ancient symbols they did not create. One of the strangest patterns in early history is the use of symbols that greatly predate the societies that used them. Crowns, staffs, serpents, bird motifs, cosmic discs, tree patterns, water cult imagery, animal masks, sun and moon cycles. These elements appear in ceremonial artifacts from the earliest dynasties, but they also appear thousands of years earlier in rock art, cave paintings, megalithic carvings, Neolithic shrines. Civilizations did not create these symbols, they inherited them, often without understanding their original meaning. Imagine a king placing a crown on his head, unaware that the symbol originated in a lost ritual from a forgotten people who lived millennia earlier. Imagine priests performing rituals based on symbols whose origins were already ancient, even to them. History is full of inherited traditions, whose creators are gone forever. The lost epoch is the unseen architect behind civilization. The first laws echoed the oldest taboos. The code of Ur-Nammu, the laws of Hammurabi, the Egyptian negative confessions, the early Chinese legal maxims. These are the first written laws, but they were not new. They merely codified what humanity had enforced orally for thousands of years. Many early laws are simply written versions of don't steal, don't kill, don't violate kinship, protect the community, honor the dead. These are the oldest human obligations. Their origins are lost, but their persistence reveals something quietly profound. The lost epoch established the foundations of human morality. Writing did not invent ethics. Writing froze ethics. The earliest codes are fossilized versions of unwritten principles that evolved in small communities over tens of thousands of years. These unwritten principles are older than any civilization, older than agriculture, older than language families. They belong to humanity itself. The earliest calendars are older than civilization. Civilizations tracked solstices, equinoxes, lunar cycles, stellar risings, but the practice did not begin with them. Megalithic structures, in Britain, in Turkey, in the Sahara, align with celestial events thousands of years older than writing. This means that prehistoric peoples understood the length of the year, the patterns of the moon, the movements of stars. Civilizations simply formalized what the lost epoch already knew. The first calendars were carved into memory, not stone. And when civilizations built temples aligned with the sky, they were honoring a tradition older than their own existence. The lost epoch did not end when history began. This is perhaps the most important truth of all. Recorded history did not replace the lost epoch, it grew from it. The ancient world stood on the shoulders of forgotten cultures. Writing captured the topmost branches of a tree whose roots stretch into prehistory. Civilizations inherited symbols, stories, rituals, tools, technologies, agricultural practices, astronomical knowledge from cultures that left no record. The lost epoch is not a different world. It is the foundation of every world that followed, and the echoes of that foundation still shape us now. In the next segment, we will walk into the philosophical heart of this documentary. What does it mean that 98% of human history is forgotten? How should we think about ourselves when our story is mostly silence? Let your breath fall into a calm rhythm, in and out, as if the world itself is breathing with you. Because now we step into a quiet question, one so large, so humbling, so profound, that entire civilizations wrestled with it in ritual and philosophy. We have traveled through forgotten eras, drowned coastlines, vanished languages, and symbolic fragments inherited by ancient worlds. We have walked through cities built on top of older cities, and myths shaped by memories older than myth itself. And now the question becomes, what does it mean that almost everything humanity lived through is gone? Not the ruins, not the pottery, not the symbols, but the experience, the emotional world, the dreams, the fears, the insights, the memories of billions of people who walked the earth before history began. People who felt as deeply as we do, people who loved and worried and hoped and imagined, people who looked at stars with awe long before astronomy existed. Their entire mental universe is lost. And yet, we exist because they lived. Every thought we have rests on foundations built in forgotten ages. So tonight, let us explore the deepest mystery of all. Why the vast majority of human history is not only forgotten, but unrememberable. History is not the human story, it is the human exception. When you imagine the story of humanity, you might picture Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, Greece, Rome, the Maya, the Indus Valley. But these civilizations represent the final 1 or 2% of human existence. Imagine a 100-meter timeline of human life. The first 98 meters are prehistory, the last 2 meters are history. Writing occupies the final few centimeters. Modern civilization, everything we recognize, is a thin strip at the very edge. This means the world you understand is not the world humans lived in for most of our existence. Our languages, our governments, our religions, our philosophies, our technologies, all emerged very late. For the vast majority of time, humans lived in ways that left little trace. Not primitive, just unrecorded. Not empty, just unpreserved. The lost epoch is not a void. It is our true origin. We inherited instincts from people we cannot name. Think about your fears, darkness, heights, the unknown. Think about your instincts to protect loved ones, to form groups, to seek meaning, to follow stories. These did not come from civilization. These came from the lost epoch, from ancestors who survived ice-bound winters, who crossed grasslands, who endured drought, who revered sky patterns, who told stories around fires. They shaped you without leaving their names behind. You carry memories of their world in your body. And yet, their identities are gone. This is the paradox of the lost epoch. We feel the presence of people we will never know. We are shaped by worlds we cannot remember. The silence is not accidental, it is natural. Human memory was never designed to last thousands of years. Communities hold memory for a generation or two, oral tradition for a few centuries, symbols for millennia, and writing for as long as material survives. But the earliest humans lived before symbolic permanence. Their memory was bodily, emotional, ritual, performative, relational, not written, not stored, not saved. So the silence is not evidence of a missing golden age. It is simply the natural consequence of being human. Human memory is short. Human experience is vast. And the silence grows because time keeps moving. The lost epoch is the normal state of history. Recorded history is the anomaly. Every ancient civilization looked back and saw darkness. When Sumer looked into its past, it saw an age of antediluvian kings, a world already forgotten. When Egypt looked into its past, it imagined the time of the gods, a symbolic memory of an age older than Egypt itself. When India looked back, it saw yugas, ages of humanity whose origins blur into myth. When China looked back, it spoke of sage kings, ancient moral figures from eras no one remembered clearly. When the Maya looked back, they imagined previous creations that ended before their world began. Every civilization recorded the same truth. Before us was a world we cannot fully remember. The lost epoch was already ancient, even to the ancients. They sensed it in inherited rituals, in symbols older than writing, in burial patterns older than their own cities, in myths that felt like hand-me-downs from forgotten peoples. We often ask why ancient cultures were obsessed with origins. The answer is simple. They were trying to remember what humanity had already forgotten. Why humans need origin stories. Every society develops a story about where it came from. Why? Because without a sense of origins, identity dissolves. Civilizations built, genealogies, creation myths, ancestral narratives, cosmologies, divine lineages, founding heroes. Not because these were literal, but because they filled the unbearable silence left by prehistory. And that silence was enormous. Imagine being an ancient priest in Egypt or Sumer, realizing we have no idea how old humanity is. Imagine looking at a landscape filled with relics from cultures older than your own, but having no way to understand them. Imagine inheriting rituals whose meaning is unclear, even to the people performing them. Civilization tried to answer a question the lost epoch refused to explain. Where did we come from? And the answers, beautiful as they are symbolic bridges over a chasm of forgetting. Most lives are unremembered, yet not unimportant. Here is a truth, both humbling and comforting. Of the billions of people who lived during the lost epoch, almost none are remembered by name. No monuments, no records, no inscriptions, no family trees. But they cared for children and helped their neighbors. They risked their lives for loved ones. They mourned their dead. They sang songs. They shared meals. They dreamed of better days. They felt everything we feel with the same depth, the same intensity. The fact that they are forgotten does not diminish their lives. It simply reveals that meaning does not depend on record keeping. The lost epoch was full of meaning. Its silence is not emptiness. It is mystery. A mystery filled with human presence. We live in a fragile window of memory. Everything you know, your culture, your language, your identity, your history, exists in a tiny bubble floating on an ocean of forgetting. If writing had emerged a little later, if clay tablets had never been fired, if papyrus had rotted sooner, history would look very different. Recorded memory is fragile. A flood can erase a library. A fire can destroy a city. A drought can end a tradition. A migration can erase a language. A single generation can break the chain of knowledge. And yet, we imagine history as solid. It is not solid. It is thin, delicate, lucky. The lost epoch reminds us of this. It whispers, "You are standing on the edge of a much larger story." The deepest question of all. So what does it mean that 98% of human history is unremembered? It means we are newcomers to our own story. We know only the final lines. We live in the echo, not the original sound. And yet, this is not tragic. It is freeing, because the lost epoch teaches us something profound. Human identity is not built on memory alone. It is built on continuity, connection, intuition, imagination, inheritance. We carry the past even when we cannot name it. We are shaped by forgotten worlds. We are the continuation of people we will never meet, never know, never remember, but whose lives flow into ours like underground rivers. In the next segment, we will explore why myth, memory, and archaeology all point to one truth. Humanity has always been older than its own understanding. If you want to travel deeper into this realization, let the quiet settle again. The kind of quiet that feels like standing in an empty temple, long after the last worshiper has left. A quiet filled with presence, not absence. A quiet that holds echoes, not emptiness. Because now we enter one of the most delicate truths hidden inside the lost epoch. Humanity has always been older than its own understanding. Every ancient civilization looked back and felt small before the vastness of the forgotten world. Every philosopher wondered about ages beyond the reach of memory. Every storyteller felt the weight of voices that no longer had names. And every human, from the first stone toolmaker to the first astronomer, sensed that they stood on layers far deeper than they could comprehend. Tonight, we step into those layers. We explore what it means that humanity rises from a darkness so profound that even the brightest civilizations could not illuminate it fully. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because the past refuses to be fully known. The lost epoch is not only a historical silence, it is a philosophical one. Let us walk deeper into that silence. Civilizations are brief, humanity is ancient. A civilization lasts, on average, 1,000 to 3,000 years. That sounds long, until you place it beside the full span of human existence. If humanity were a single day, civilization would occupy only the final minute, less even. Everything you recognize, cities, writing, law, religion, science, is contained in that last minute. Before that minute were hundreds of thousands of years of human lives. People laughed, people mourned, people hunted, people farmed, people built, people created symbols, falling stars of meaning in the night of deep time. And yet, their names are not spoken, not because they didn't matter, but because civilizations are brief candles lit at the end of a very long night. The night is the lost epoch. The candle is us. The earth remembers through stone, not through names. If you walk through the oldest ruins, you notice something strange. The stone remembers structure, but it does not remember identity. The earth preserves walls, foundations, pottery, tools, bones, fire traces, seeds, pigments, but it does not preserve the sound of laughter, the secret rituals, individual voices, private dreams, the meaning of symbols, the stories told at night, the melodies of songs, the emotions of daily life. Archaeology restores the skeleton of ancient worlds, but the flesh, the living essence, is gone. This is why the lost epoch feels so mysterious. It is not empty, it is simply unrecorded in the way history requires. The earth remembers what time allows it to hold. Humanity remembers what its stories allow it to hold. Everything else dissolves. Memory is a human construction. Time is not ancient. People believed that time was cyclical. Seasons returned, stars returned, rivers flooded and receded. Generations rose and fell. Time, to them, was a wheel. But memory does not work like time. Memory is fragile, linear, selective. It forgets quietly. It erases without malice. It thins across generations until nothing remains except the shape of stories. Human memory is like sand in a windstorm, always shifting, always drifting, never stable. Time, by contrast, is stone. It does not drift. It stacks. It layers. The lost epoch exists because memory dissolves while time accumulates. We stand on the immense pile of time left behind by forgotten generations. But memory is a thin thread that breaks easily. This is why we must use archaeology to understand what memory lost. Because memory alone cannot hold the weight of the world. Your own life mirrors the lost epoch. Consider this. How much of your great-grandparents' lives do you remember? Perhaps a few stories passed down through family. How much of your great-great-grandparents' lives do you know? Likely almost nothing. Now imagine 10 generations, 20, 50, 100. You carry their blood, their genetic memory, their instincts, their subtleties, their fears, their hopes, their inherited emotions. But you do not carry their names. You do not carry their stories. You do not carry their rituals. In your own family history, you already experience the lost epoch. Not because the stories were unimportant, but because memory fades unless it is written, performed, or ritualized. Humanity's history worked the same way. The lost epoch is not distant. It is personal. It is history reduced to silence by the passing of time. Your own existence is built on forgotten lives. Humanity survived without being remembered. There is a gentle beauty in knowing that billions of people lived meaningful lives without leaving records. They loved, they raised children, they helped strangers, they shaped landscapes, they survived hardships, they discovered techniques, they crafted tools, they built communities, and they did these things without expecting to be remembered. Meaning did not come from legacy. It came from living. Civilization tells us that to matter, one must be remembered. The lost epoch whispers a different truth. Human life matters even when it leaves no mark. A comforting truth, a humbling truth, a deeply human truth. The universe itself is mostly darkness. When you look up at the night sky, you see stars, bright, eternal, beautiful. But stars represent a tiny fraction of the universe. Most of the cosmos is invisible. Dark matter, dark energy, vast emptiness. The visible world is the exception, not the rule. The lost epoch is humanity's version of dark matter, vast, unseen, but foundational. We are shaped by what we cannot see. Just as galaxies are shaped by invisible gravity, humanity is shaped by invisible memory. We feel it in the pull of instinct, in the structure of myth, in the patterns of our societies, in the symbols that endure. The lost epoch is our dark matter, the unseen mass that holds human history together. We fear the lost epoch because we fear the unknown. It is uncomfortable to realize that most of our story is inaccessible. Humans want clarity, chronology, order, explanation. We want to understand ourselves. But the lost epoch makes one thing clear. We are built on foundations we do not fully understand. This is not frightening. It is natural. Understanding everything is not required for meaning. Even ancient civilizations accepted that they lived in a world whose earliest chapters were unreachable, and they did not despair. They built on the mystery. They created stories. They honored ancestors they could not name. They created meaning in the present moment. The unknown did not diminish them. It guided them. We are the first era to know we forgot. Perhaps the strangest truth is this. Ancient civilizations did not know that most of humanity's story was gone. They believed their origins were accessible through myth. They believed they knew where they came from. But today, we know better. We know languages died, cultures dissolved, identities faded, memories evaporated, symbols lost meaning, worlds were buried, stories vanished, knowledge dissolved. We are the first civilization that can see the magnitude of its forgetting, the first to imagine the scale of the silence, the first to recognize that our story is mostly lost. And this knowledge gives us both humility and wonder. The lost epoch teaches us who we are. When we confront the lost epoch, we learn three things about ourselves. 1. Humanity is resilient. We survived cold, drought, hunger, and isolation long before cities existed. 2. Humanity is creative. We shaped meaning out of landscapes and patterns out of stars long before writing emerged. 3. Humanity is ancient. Our story began far beyond the first scribes, the first kings, the first temples. We are not the peak of human evolution. We are the continuation of forgotten worlds. The lost epoch is not a tragedy of missing information. It is a reminder that the human story is deeper, wider, and more mysterious than we imagine. And as we step into the next segment, we will explore something even deeper, what we do know about the lost epoch, not through stories or symbols, but through archaeology, genetics, and the physical traces left behind by ancient peoples. Take one slow breath. Let the mind settle. Because now we are entering the layer where mystery meets science, where the silence of prehistory is broken gently by evidence. Archaeology cannot give us names, but it can give us patterns. Genetics cannot give us stories, but it can reveal migrations. Climate records cannot give us memories, but they can reveal the environments that shaped ancient lives. This segment is the moment where imagination bows to evidence, where wonder combines with method, where the lost epoch becomes something we can see, not clearly, but dimly, like a landscape viewed through morning fog. Let us walk into that fog quietly and see what emerges. Archaeology. The earth writes its own history. When humans forget, the earth remembers, not in language, but in layers. A hearth becomes a black patch beneath the soil. A dwelling becomes a faint stain in the ground. Tools scatter across sediment. Seeds fossilize. Bones mineralize. Shards of pottery survive thousands of years. Archaeology is the practice of reading these shadows, and the shadows reveal a picture far richer than the simple narratives of primitive humans. Archaeology shows that, long before writing, humans created art, humans used pigments, humans crafted tools with precision, humans organized communities, humans held rituals, humans traded over vast distances, humans engineered environments, humans managed resources, humans adapted to climate change, humans buried their dead with care. The lost epoch was full of intelligence, skill, and meaning. Its silence is not due to emptiness, but to the lack of writing. The earth holds the memory that humans did not. The tools tell a story of innovation. Stone tools are often described as primitive, but early humans developed techniques so refined that even modern researchers struggle to replicate them. Consider the Levallois technique, a method of shaping stone into precise flakes by preparing the core in advance. It required long-term planning, spatial awareness, motor precision, teaching and learning, shared knowledge across generations. This is not primitive behavior, this is engineering, and it appeared over 300,000 years ago, long before writing, long before agriculture, long before civilization. The lost epoch was not an age of stagnation, it was an age of continuous innovation. Tools evolved, techniques spread, knowledge moved across continents. Innovation did not begin with cities. Innovation began when humans first learned to shape the world. And that shaping happened in a time we cannot fully remember. Cave art, the first libraries of the human mind. The oldest art is not found in temples. It is found in caves, deep chambers lit by flickering fire, echoing stone halls painted with bison, horses, deer, lions, mammoths, handprints, geometric shapes, spirals, dots, mysterious symbols. Some images are 40,000 years old, some may be older, and these paintings reveal something astonishing. Prehistoric people understood symbolism long before writing. Some paintings track animal movement, some track star cycles, some depict rituals, some resemble early calendars. Some appear to be proto-symbolic representations of concepts we no longer understand, and certain symbols recur across continents: the spiral, the cross, the zigzag, the circle, the radiating sun, the handprint. These are not random doodles. They are the first visual language of humanity, a language that predates writing by tens of thousands of years. Cave paintings are not decoration, they are memory, and memory, when painted on stone, outlives the storyteller. Burial sites, the earliest evidence of belief. The dead tell stories, the living forget. Across the lost epoch, we find burials filled with meaning. Bodies positioned facing sunrise, ochre covering the bones, tools placed as companions, beads, shells and ornaments, animal remains offering symbolic presence, signs of ritual fire, grave goods positioned with intention. This means the people of the lost epoch held beliefs about the afterlife, the sacredness of the body, spiritual continuity, memory, ancestry, the unseen world. Belief, not superstition, but meaning, is much older than temples or priests. The earliest rituals were not performed in civilizations. They were performed in forests, in mountains, in caves, in grasslands. Religion did not begin with gods. It began with the human need to understand existence. And that need is older than writing, older than cities, older than history. The lost epoch was full of spirituality, expressed in forms we no longer recognize. Genetics, the map written in our bodies. If archaeology is the memory of the earth, genetics is the memory of the body. DNA shows that humanity has always been in motion. Migration waves crisscrossed continents long before written maps existed. From Africa into Arabia, into the Himalayas and Central Asia, across the coasts of India, into Australia, through the steppes of Eurasia, into Europe, across the Bering Land Bridge, down the Americas, across island chains into the Pacific. Every migration brought technological exchange, cultural blending, language shifts, biological adaptation. And genetics reveals something remarkable. There was no single origin culture. There were dozens, hundreds, small groups influencing one another, mixing, separating, merging again. Humanity did not spread like a straight line. It spread like a river delta, branching, splitting, rejoining, adapting. The lost epoch is the story of that movement, a story written in your cells. You carry genes from people who lived in worlds now forgotten. You carry ancestry from cultures that left no artifacts. You carry fragments of entire lineages that archaeology has never found. You are, in a quiet way, a living museum of the ancient world. Climate science, the environment that sculpted us. The lost epoch was defined not by kingdoms, but by climate. Ice ages, warming periods, megadroughts, volcanic winters, rainforest expansion, desertification, sea level rise. Each shift reshaped human life. Climate drove migrations. Climate redirected rivers. Climate created refuges. Climate destroyed habitats. Climate forced innovation. Climate birthed myths. When the Sahara dried, people moved toward the Nile, and Egypt was formed. When glaciers retreated, people entered Europe and developed new techniques. When sea levels rose, coastal cultures disappeared, giving rise to flood myths worldwide. The lost epoch was not static. It was dynamic. Humanity evolved, not in a single landscape, but in worlds that changed again and again. Civilization is the child of climate stability. Prehistory is the story of humanity learning to survive without it. The science of memory, what can't be recovered. There are things that archaeology, genetics, and climate science can never give us. Names, languages, music, dreams, fears, jokes, myths in their original form, personal identities, individual stories. These are gone, because they were carried in human minds, not in stone, not in bones, not in genetics. The lost epoch is lost, because the ancient world did not write itself down. This is not a flaw. It is simply the nature of early humanity. Memory was short, life was fragile, tradition was personal, meaning was local. What we seek from the lost epoch is not missing. It simply never existed in a form that could survive. And yet, through science, through careful excavation, through genetic analysis, through climate reconstruction, we recover enough to see the outlines of that ancient world. Not a full picture, but a silhouette, a shape, a suggestion, a quiet presence behind the veil. The lost epoch is not a mystery to be solved. It is a reality to be accepted, a reminder of the vastness of human time. And in the next segment, we enter the slow descent toward conclusion. How all these fragments, myth, archaeology, genetics, cosmology, paint a single, profound picture of humanity's forgotten beginning. Let the world soften around you again. Let the breath deepen. Let your mind drift, like a lantern floating on dark water. Because now we arrive at the point where all threads meet. We have traveled through forgotten migrations, drowned coastlines, vanished languages, symbolic memories, the rise of early civilizations, the deep science of humanity's origins, the quiet erosion of memory. And now, something becomes clear. The lost epoch is not one mystery. It is many mysteries woven together. A tapestry of silence, stitched with fragments of evidence. A long, ancient story, with most of its pages missing. But if you step back, if you look at everything at once, patterns emerge. Patterns that reveal not what we lost, but who we are. Let us explore these patterns gently, slowly, as if we're examining faint constellations in the night sky. Pattern 1. Humanity was never primitive. When you picture early humans, you might imagine simplicity, hardship, ignorance, a world without art or imagination. But every piece of evidence contradicts that image. Before writing existed, humans had tools requiring engineering, art requiring symbolism, rituals requiring belief, migrations requiring planning, adaptations requiring innovation, communities requiring cooperation, burial traditions requiring meaning, myths requiring imagination. Nothing about this is primitive. Humanity was fully human, long before civilizations appeared. The lost epoch was not an age of ignorance. It was an age of life, rich, intelligent, adaptive, creative. The silence tricks us, but the evidence reveals truth. Our ancestors were not incomplete versions of us. We are the continuation of them. Pattern 2. The ancient world was always changing. Civilization gives us the illusion of stability. Cities stand for centuries. Written laws endure. Temples remain anchored in specific places. But the lost epoch was shaped by constant change. People moved. Rivers moved. Forests expanded and retreated. Ice advanced and melted. Animals migrated. Climates shifted. Landscapes transformed. Humanity didn't stay still. It adapted again and again to a world that never stopped shifting. This teaches us something profound. Change is not a modern condition. It is the human condition. The stability of civilization is the exception, not the rule. The lost epoch is the story of humanity learning to dance with change. Pattern 3. The deep past lives inside our myths. When archaeologists compare the world's earliest myths, they discover striking similarities. Floods, creation from chaos, cosmic serpents, twin ancestors, world trees, underworlds, cycles of rebirth, heavenly battles, sacred mountains. These themes existed long before writing. They are not coincidences. They are inherited memories, echoes passed through thousands of generations. Not literal events, but emotional truths, symbolic memories of natural cycles and environmental forces that shaped early humanity. Myth is not fiction. Myth is memory that has changed shape. And that shape is our window into the lost epoch. Pattern 4. Genetic evidence reveals invisible stories. Genetics shows that humanity's past is far more complex than simple migration models suggest. Human groups split, mixed, rejoined, replaced one another, influenced one another, carried knowledge across continents. This means there was no single origin civilization, no single origin culture. Humanity was always a network, a web of relationships, travels, interactions, intermarriages, exchanges. The lost epoch was not fragmented chaos. It was a braided river of human connections. The past was more connected than we imagine, yet more diverse than we can reconstruct. Pattern 5. Memory survives through symbols, not through facts. Facts require writing. Symbols require imagination. The lost epoch gave us symbols, circles, spirals, crosses, tree forms, animal spirits, sun disks, moon phases. These symbols lasted longer than empires. Why? Because symbols carry meaning, not information. Information fades when context is lost. Meaning endures when it resonates with human emotion. Symbols survive because they speak to something universal. Emotion, connection, identity, fear, hope, wonder. The lost epoch left us no chronicles, but it left us symbols that still glow with ancient memory. Pattern 6. Continuity is a myth. We often imagine humanity as a continuous line. Hunter-gatherers, early farmers, civilizations, us. But the reality is far more fractured. Cultures rose, fell, and reinvented themselves. Technologies appeared, vanished, then reappeared elsewhere. Languages split and merged like living rivers. Knowledge spread in unpredictable, non-linear ways. Continuity does not exist in the deep past. Only adaptation, only improvisation, only the quiet determination to survive. This teaches us humanity's greatest strength is not stability, it is flexibility. Civilization is built not on unbroken continuity, but on countless lost experiments and forgotten innovations. The lost epoch is full of such unseen chapters, and every civilization is built on their remains. Pattern 7. The past is not behind us, it is beneath us. When we imagine the lost epoch, we tend to picture it as something distant. But the past is not distant. It is layered. Cities are built on top of older cities. Languages evolve from older languages. Rituals emerge from older rituals. Beliefs transform from older symbols. If you dig deep enough, beneath streets, beneath monuments, beneath the foundations of cities, you find other worlds, forgotten ones, where people lived, worked, loved, prayed, died. We are not separate from the lost epoch. We are standing on top of it. Literally. Every city rests on forgotten ones. Every culture rests on older traditions. Every identity rests on ancient roots. The lost epoch is not behind us, it is below us, like the foundation of a mountain, invisible but essential. Pattern 8. Humanity has always searched for meaning. From the earliest rituals in caves to the first written philosophies, humans have always asked, who are we? Where did we come from? What came before us? Why do we exist? What is our place in the vastness of time? Civilization did not invent the search for meaning. Civilization inherited it. The lost epoch was full of questions that we still ask today. And perhaps this is the most important pattern. We are not separate from ancient humanity. We are a continuation of its longing. We seek answers because they sought answers. We wonder because they wondered. We dream because they dreamed. We are not modern minds replacing ancient ones. We are ancient minds with modern tools. The questions of prehistory echo within us because we are built from the same consciousness. And this realization leads to the final question of our journey. What does it mean to inherit a story that is mostly missing? To live in a world built on forgotten ages. To walk through cities made of older ruins. To carry within our bodies the genetics of peoples who left no names behind. In the next segment, we begin the closing arc, bringing all these ideas toward a final, gentle conclusion. Let your breath settle. Let your mind drift quietly. Because now we step into the final arc of this long journey. Not an ending, but the soft narrowing of a path that has stretched across millennia. We have walked through forgotten ancestors, lost landscapes, symbolic memories, early civilizations built on shadows, scientific clues, philosophical silence, all leading us here, to the ultimate realization. We are the inheritors of a story written mostly in darkness. But darkness is not emptiness. Darkness is depth. Darkness is origin. Darkness is potential. And the lost epoch is not a void. It is a quiet foundation that supports everything above it. The ancient world did not lose its story. It simply told it quietly. Through migrations, through rituals, through tools, through art, through breath. Tonight, we listen to what remains of that story. The next steps bring us to the emotional clarity and the awe that this entire documentary has been building toward. Let us move gently. The past is not forgotten. We simply cannot hear it clearly. Imagine a distant conversation. You can see shapes of people talking. You can see gestures, movement, emotion. But you cannot hear their words. That is the lost epoch. We see tools, shelters, fire pits, paints, bones, seeds, early carvings, patterns in migration. But we do not hear what they believed, what they whispered, what they feared, what they hoped for, what they told their children, what their dreams meant, what their rituals symbolized. The conversation continues through evidence, but not through words. Humanity did not forget because it failed to remember. Humanity forgot because the earliest stories were told quietly, in songs, in gestures, in shared food, in sacred spaces, in the way people lived together. None of these things last thousands of years, and so the past feels silent. But silence is not the absence of meaning. Silence is the presence of meaning that does not speak in words we understand. The earth holds memory we cannot access. When archaeologists dig, they do not recover history. They recover the physical residue of human existence. A flake of stone shaped by deliberate pressure. A fire pit on which ancient meals were cooked. A bone carved with attention and skill. A burial arranged with reverence, a pigment left from a painting ritual, a footprint frozen in ash or mud. Each fragment is a memory written in matter. But we cannot place ourselves inside these moments. We can only stand at the doorway. The earth has kept these memories better than human minds did. But the earth does not explain. It does not say why a tool was shaped this way, why a body was buried like that, why a painting was created, why a settlement was abandoned. The earth preserves details, but not meaning. Meaning belonged to the people, and the people belonged to time. Time carried them away, not because it is cruel, but because it is unstoppable. The mystery is not that we lost history. The mystery is that we try to reconstruct it. Most species never wonder where they came from, but humans do. We look at the world and feel the weight of a past we cannot name. We want to know who came before us, how they lived, why they shaped the world in the ways they did. And when answers fade, we feel a longing not for facts, but for connection, for belonging to a story larger than ourselves. This longing is the heartbeat of archaeology, mythology, and history. The lost epoch is not only a historical puzzle, it is a psychological question. Why do humans feel incomplete without knowing where they came from? Civilizations rise not out of power, but out of this hunger for meaning. Writing was invented not to control people, but to preserve memory. Temples were built not for spectacle, but for continuity. Philosophy was born not out of surplus, but out of yearning. Every attempt at history is an attempt to close the gap between ourselves and the lost epoch. But a gap that large cannot be crossed. It can only be honored. We are the first to see the lost epoch as a whole. Ancients did not know how old humanity was. They imagined beginnings within reach of myth. Today, we know. Humans existed 300,000 years ago. Symbolism is over 100,000 years old. Ocean migrations happened 50,000 years ago. Cave art flourished 40,000 years ago. Agriculture began 12,000 years ago. Civilization began 5,000 years ago. Writing began only 5% of the way into history. This gives us a perspective no civilization before us ever had. We can see the scale of human time. We can see the depth of human silence. We are the first culture that understands history is small, humanity is vast. The lost epoch is not a corner of the past. It is almost the entire past. We exist in a tiny, illuminated chamber built on a mountain of forgotten worlds. And somehow, knowing this does not diminish us. It grounds us. It humbles us. It connects us to something older than nations, older than religions, older than identities. It makes us part of the human story, not just the historical story. Why the lost epoch feels like a dream. The silence of prehistory is not empty. It feels dreamlike, and dreams have certain qualities. They are vivid yet unclear, symbolic rather than factual, familiar yet impossible to grasp, emotional rather than chronological, meaningful though unexplainable, fragmented yet coherent in spirit. Does this not resemble our relationship to the lost epoch? We see traces, paintings in dark, caves, spirals on stone, flint shaped into perfect tools, ancient bones arranged with care, migration paths across continents. But the emotional content, the story, remains out of reach. The lost epoch is humanity's collective dream, half remembered, half forgotten. And every discovery, a new fossil, a buried settlement, a forgotten tool, Feels like waking up from a dream you didn't know you had. A whisper from deep time. You come from more than you realize. The deepest meaning of the lost epoch. After all this, one quiet truth rises. We carry ancient humanity not in memory, but in presence, in our bodies, in our instincts, in our art, in our symbols, in our fears, in our longing for meaning, in our need for story, in our love of beauty, in our curiosity about origins, in our sense of the sacred, in our search for connection. We are not cut off from the lost epoch. We are its continuation. We are the last chapter of a story written mostly in silence. And every breath you take, every thought you think, every dream you have is connected to people who lived 10,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago. You have never lived outside the lost epoch. You were born from it. You are the living memory of forgotten worlds. Take one slow breath. Let it stretch softly and fade gently. The room should feel quieter now, your body heavier, your mind calmer, because we are reaching the final strata of this long descent, the deepest and softest layer, where the lost epoch stops being a question and becomes a mirror, not a mirror reflecting faces or objects or places, but a mirror reflecting human existence itself. For hours now, we have traveled through forgotten ages, drowned worlds, vanished languages, symbolic legacies, early civilizations built on fragments, scientific traces, philosophical truths. And now, all these threads converge into one simple realization. Humanity is shaped far more by what we do not remember than by what we do. The lost epoch is the proof. Tonight, let us understand what that means. 1. Forgetting is not a failure. It is a natural part of being human. We often think forgetting is a flaw, a breakdown of memory. But forgetting is essential. If the mind remembered every detail, it would drown in noise. If cultures remembered every event, they would drown in contradictions. Forgetting is how we evolve. Forgetting is how we adapt. Forgetting is how we make room for new stories. And on the scale of human history, forgetting created space for civilization to emerge. The lost epoch is not a tragedy. It is the fertile soil from which identity grows. You cannot write a story without a blank page. You cannot begin a journey without leaving something behind. Humanity did both. 2. The unknown is not empty. It is alive with meaning. People fear the unknown because they imagine darkness to be emptiness. But the unknown is full of ancient lives, forgotten innovations, symbolic origins, emotional truths, migrations and struggles, rituals practiced for millennia, lost ways of seeing the world. Everything you are, your instincts, your emotions, your rhythms, your sense of belonging, emerged from that unknown. The lost epoch is not empty darkness. It is rich soil beneath the roots of everything humanity became. And like the soil beneath a forest, its value lies in being hidden. 3. We carry the lost epoch within us. Your body is a history book, older than any surviving text. It carries ancestral adaptations, ancient reflexes, inherited fears, deep-rooted joys, biological rhythms, primal intuitions, emotional patterns, traces of forgotten migrations. When you feel drawn to fire, you echo ancient nights. When you fear the dark, you repeat ancestral caution. When you stare at stars, you feel what early humans felt. When you dream, you use the oldest language humanity knows. The lost epoch never ended. It lives inside you. Humanity did not leave prehistory. We carry prehistory forward in our minds, our cells, our behaviors, our collective imagination. Civilization is only a thin layer over something much older. 4. We are the first generation capable of seeing the big picture. For tens of thousands of years, humans understood time only through stories. Civilizations understood time through dynasties and chronicles. But today, for the first time in history, we can see all layers at once: geology, archaeology, genetics, ecology, anthropology, climate science, astronomy, linguistics. We are the first generation that can see the lost epoch for what it truly was. Not mystery, not myth, not speculation, but the vast, foundational expanse of human existence. We see its shape, even if we cannot read its details. We see the mountain, even if the fog covers it. And this view, this whole picture perspective, is something no ancient civilization ever possessed. It gives us humility. It gives us awe. It gives us belonging. It gives us perspective. It gives us peace. 5. The value of mystery is greater than the value of answers. Ancient people embraced mystery. They did not fear the unknown, they honored it. They built temples for things they could not explain. They told stories for forces they could not control. They created rituals for questions they could not answer. Today, we often rush to eliminate mystery, to fill every gap with fact. But the lost epoch reminds us that mystery is not the enemy of knowledge. Mystery is the origin of knowledge. Wonder comes first, questions come second, understanding comes last. The ancients understood this. They were comfortable living inside questions, and perhaps that is the lesson. We don't always need final answers to feel connected to the past. Sometimes, the questions themselves are enough. 6. You are not separate from ancient humanity. It's easy to imagine that people from the lost epoch were strangers, distant, incomprehensible, alien. But if you could speak to them for even a moment, you would see yourself. They loved, they protected, they feared, they hoped, they mourned, they created beauty, they sought meaning, they cared for their children. They looked at the sky and wondered why they existed. Nothing about their inner world was primitive. Their tools may have been stone, but their emotions were human. The people of the lost epoch are not ancient strangers. They are your ancestors, in every sense that matters. If you strip away the modern world, your instincts, your fears, your dreams are theirs. You are not merely the descendant of civilization. You are the descendant of forgotten worlds that breathed, loved, and lived long before cities rose. 7. The lost epoch is a reminder of our fragility and our strength. Humanity almost didn't make it. Volcanic winters reduced populations. Megadroughts destroyed habitats. Flood pulses drowned coasts. Cold ages reshaped continents. Species disappeared. Landscapes transformed beyond recognition. And yet, we survived. We adapted. We migrated. We innovated. We learned. We rebuilt. We grew. We dreamed. The lost epoch is not the story of what humanity lost. It is the story of how humanity endured. Civilization exists not because the world was easy, but because early humans were stronger in spirit than we give them credit for. Their resilience is why you are here. Your existence is the continuation of thousands of quiet victories won by people you will never know. 8. The lost epoch is not a mystery to be solved. It is a mystery to be honored. There is a tendency to treat forgotten history like a puzzle. If only we dig deeper, decode further, discover more, we could solve the lost epoch. But the lost epoch is not a problem. It is a foundation, a deep, ancient reality that shaped us in ways we barely understand. Not knowing every detail does not diminish its importance. Instead, it elevates it. Mystery gives context to our existence. Silence gives shape to our story. The unknown gives depth to the known. And the lost epoch gives meaning to history. Let the quiet gather around you now, like dusk settling over an old landscape. We have walked far, across continents buried by time, across memories carried by myth, across evidence written in soil, in bone, in stars. But now the path becomes narrow, not because the story is ending, but because the story is turning inward, towards something personal, something human, something intimate. Because the lost epoch is not just about forgotten civilizations and ancient migrations. It is about you. It is about why the unknown touches us, why silence moves us. Why we feel connected to people who lived tens of thousands of years ago. In this final descent, we explore why the forgotten past still lives in us, why the mystery brings comfort, why not knowing everything is part of being human, why the lost epoch gives meaning to the present. Let the world soften, and let us step gently into the last chambers of this journey. The past lives in us, even when we cannot name it. Close your eyes for a moment, or let your gaze soften. Feel your heartbeat. Feel the warmth of your body. Feel the rhythm of your breath. These rhythms did not begin with you. They did not begin with your parents, your grandparents, or even your earliest ancestors who learned to speak. These rhythms stretch back hundreds of thousands of years. The human heartbeat is ancient. The human breath is ancient. The human instinct to seek warmth, safety, meaning, all ancient. The lost epoch lives inside your flesh. You are the biological archive of forgotten ages. Every cell is a record of survival. Every instinct is a memory of landscapes your ancestors walked. Every emotion, joy, fear, grief, awe, is a response shaped by experiences older than civilization. The lost epoch is not behind you. It is within you. The mystery comforts us because we are born from mystery. Think about how you feel when you look at the night sky. There is a soft, indescribable emotion, a mixture of awe and peace and longing. This emotion is older than astronomy, older than philosophy, older than storytelling. It is the emotion your ancestors felt when they looked at the stars on ancient nights, tens of thousands of years ago, when the sky was brighter than we can imagine today, when the Milky Way felt like a luminous river, when the heavens felt close enough to touch. The stars reminded them of the vastness beyond their understanding. And instead of fear, they felt connection, a sense that humanity was part of something bigger than memory or history or story. We feel the same because we carry the same ancient mind. Mystery is not frightening when it is familiar, and the lost epoch is deeply familiar because we come from it. Mystery is our first home. The silence of the lost epoch teaches us what truly matters. When we look at forgotten civilizations, what disappears? Names, facts, chronologies, dates, records. What remains? Ritual, art, burials, tools, the way people treated their dead, the way they created beauty, the way they cared for each other. The silence of prehistory filters out everything except what truly mattered. It reminds us that most things humans worry about today will not survive time. But love will, care will, ritual will, community will, compassion will, meaning will. The lost epoch teaches us the deepest parts of human life are not recorded, they are lived. And the quiet parts of life are the ones that echo the longest. We forget details, but we do not forget what's important. Look back on your own life. Do you remember every meal you ate, every conversation, every word spoken? No, but you remember moments that shaped you, the people you loved, the moments you were afraid, the nights you felt wonder, the times you overcame something difficult, the times you felt connected to others or to yourself. Memory keeps what is meaningful. History is the same. The lost epoch is not a failure of record keeping. It is the natural way human memory functions. The details fade, the essence remains. And the essence is what shaped civilization. The lost epoch is the quiet foundation of everything we know. Civilization appears to be a bright structure, cities, writing, laws, philosophies. But civilization is built on a foundation that is poorly understood and barely visible. The foundation is the first human cooperation, the first shared fires, the first symbolic gestures, the first myths, the first rituals, the first communal lives, the first shared grief, the first collective dreams. These foundations are so old they cannot be dated precisely. And yet, everything that followed, every city, every temple, every kingdom, every innovation, rests on them. We tend to honor the structures above ground, but the deepest stability comes from the roots, and the roots belong to the lost epoch. This is why the past feels holy in a quiet, subtle way. Not because it was perfect, not because it was glamorous, but because it was the beginning of everything human. You are the ending of a story written in silence. Think of yourself not as a person living today, but as the final chapter of a very long story. A story written in footsteps across ancient plains, in stone tools shaped by careful hands, in pigments blown onto cave walls, in the breath of storytellers around fire, in migrations across continents, in rituals performed under the moon, in forgotten languages whispered to children, in grief written into burials, in the first symbols carved in bone, in the first songs sung without words. Most of this story was never written down, but it was lived, and you are the continuation of that living story. You are the final paragraph of a book whose first hundreds of pages are lost. Not lost in grief, not lost in tragedy, lost in the natural motion of human life. The lost epoch is your origin story, a story made of silence, yet alive in every part of who you are. And this realization, this gentle awareness, brings us to the final truth. The unknown is not your enemy. It is your inheritance. Let the world around you fall into quiet again, as if something inside you is settling, like dust floating down in the stillness of an old, forgotten temple. We have journeyed through memories older than history, older than civilization, older than writing, older than myth. And now we reach the part where understanding becomes feeling, where history becomes reflection, where knowledge becomes peace. Because the lost epoch is not simply a forgotten era, it is a condition of human existence, a reminder that we are shaped not only by what we remember, but by what we cannot remember at all. Tonight, we begin to gather those truths into one final, gentle shape, a shape you can carry with you long after this story ends. The lost epoch teaches us that most of life is lived quietly. When you look at the vast timeline of humanity, it becomes clear. Most of human history was not shaped by kings or empires. It was shaped by ordinary people living ordinary lives. People who found food, protected children, formed communities, shared warmth, crafted tools, painted stories, sang songs, loved, lost, hoped, endured. Their lives were not recorded, yet human culture was born from them. Civilization is the visible part. The lost epoch is the roots. And roots are always underground, always unseen, always essential. This realization softens our obsession with fame, impact, legacy. It reminds us the quiet life is the human life. The meaningful life is the present life. And the world is built on people whose names were never written. What your ancestors really leave behind. Think of the people who lived 50,000 years ago. Their names are gone, their homes are gone, their language is gone, their stories gone, their identities gone. And yet, they left something behind that still exists. They left you, their courage, their survival, their instincts, their strength, their adaptations, all hidden in your biology. You are their continuation, and through you, they remain part of the human story. Legacy is not memory. Legacy is existence. The lost epoch reminds us that being remembered is not the same as being important. Most of the people who shaped the human world were never remembered, but they mattered. The lost epoch teaches us that memory is not the only way to know. We usually treat memory as the highest form of preservation, but humans have always known through more than memory, through instinct, through emotion, through intuition, through ritual, through creativity, through presence. The earliest humans did not need written history to know who they were. They felt identity in the land beneath their feet, in the constellations overhead, in the community around them, in the rituals that linked past and future. The lost epoch was not a time without knowledge. It was a time when knowledge lived in bodies rather than books. The mind remembers things, the brain forgets. The heart remembers things, words cannot hold. The lost epoch is proof of this. The unknown is part of being human. Civilization tends to treat the unknown as something to conquer, chart it, measure it, record it, organize it, master it. But ancient humanity treated the unknown differently. They stood before it with respect, with humility, with awe, with curiosity, with acceptance. They built meaning in the space of not knowing. We have forgotten that this is possible. The lost epoch reminds us that mystery is not something to fear. Mystery is a space to breathe, a reminder that we do not have to know everything to feel connected to everything. And this truth is soothing, not threatening. What the lost epoch tells us about ourselves. When we examine everything together, the lost epoch reveals a profound truth. Humans are meaning makers. We seek connection in darkness. We seek understanding in silence. We seek identity in fragments. We seek continuity in what cannot be remembered. We seek belonging in ages long gone. We look at forgotten worlds and feel something familiar. A tug, a softness, a longing. This longing is not confusion, it is recognition. Recognition that part of us comes from a place beyond memory. Recognition that we are shaped by forces deeper than culture, forces as old as the species itself. Recognition that we are not separate from the ancient world, but born from it. The lost epoch is not a mystery outside of us, it is a mystery inside of us. Why the lost epoch brings peace. You might expect that knowing how much is forgotten would create anxiety, but instead, something unexpected happens. It creates peace. Why? Because the lost epoch shows us. You do not need to control everything to belong to something greater. You do not need to remember everything for life to have meaning. You do not need to know every origin to feel connected to your ancestors. You do not need full clarity to feel whole. The unknown is not threatening. It is grounding. It reminds you that perfection is not required. Record keeping is not required. Legacy is not required. Humanity survived and thrived for hundreds of thousands of years without preserving every detail. We are allowed to live imperfectly too. We are allowed to forget things and still be human. We are allowed to not know everything and still have meaning. The lost epoch gives us permission to rest in not knowing. The lost epoch makes us gentle with ourselves. If entire civilizations could vanish without failing, if countless ancestors lived meaningful lives without being remembered, if humanity could thrive for millennia without writing a single word, then maybe you don't need to carry every burden of perfection. Maybe not everything needs to be documented. Maybe not everything needs to be understood. Maybe not everything needs to be preserved. Maybe living is enough. The lost epoch softens the edges of the modern mind. It tells us you can live quietly and still matter. You can exist without a legacy and still be part of something enormous. You can forget things and still be whole. You can embrace mystery and still be wise. And this realization is the beginning of the final emotional landing. Let all the tension leave your body now. Let the breath deepen naturally, as if the past itself is exhaling through you. We have wandered far tonight, across forgotten continents, through ancient migrations, along vanished rivers, into symbolic worlds, through the quiet halls of prehistory, and finally back into ourselves. And now, in this final moment, you can feel something subtle, a stillness, a spaciousness, an openness, a sense that you are connected to something older than memory. This is the gift of the lost epoch. Not answers, not certainty, not knowledge, but connection. A connection to the vastness of human existence. A connection to lives that came long before yours. A connection to the mystery that shaped our species in silence. Tonight, we close this journey gently, honoring the world that existed before history began. The lost epoch lives in every human breath. Take one slow inhale and exhale. Your breath is older than civilization. It is older than writing in stone, older than agriculture and rituals, older than myth and meaning, older than the first words your ancestors ever spoke. Your breath belongs to humanity, and humanity belongs to a world that no longer exists. A world of cold nights lit by firelight. A world of endless plains and wandering herds. A world of star-filled skies so bright they illuminated the imagination. A world of ancestors whose names we cannot know, but whose existence shaped every part of us. When you inhale, you breathe the same air they breathed. When you look at the moon, you see the same moon they saw. When you feel awe, you feel the emotion that shaped ancient myths. You are not separate from the lost epoch. You are the continuation of it. And tonight, the quiet presence of forgotten humanity rests inside you like a warm ember. Nothing is truly lost. We say the past is lost because the details are gone. The languages, the stories, the rituals, the daily rhythms, the songs, the voices. But the essence remains, not in books, not in artifacts, not in museums. The essence remains in the shape of the human mind, the architecture of emotion, the instinct for cooperation, the search for meaning, the longing for connection, the creativity that emerges from silence. Nothing is truly lost as long as its influence remains alive. Your compassion, your ability to love, your fear of the dark, your appreciation of beauty, your sense of belonging, your desire for story, your search for purpose, all came from them. From people who lived in a world without writing, without cities, without records, a world whose memory you carry, even now. The lost epoch is not lost. It is alive in you. You are the living archive of ancient humanity. Consider this. Everything you know comes from the modern world, but everything you are comes from the ancient one. Your biology is prehistoric. Your instincts are prehistoric. Your emotions are prehistoric. Your dreams are prehistoric. Your imagination is prehistoric. Modern life sits lightly on top of ancient architecture. We like to believe we are new. But humanity is ancient. The modern world is the echo. The lost epoch is the sound. And the echo only makes sense because the sound was once so strong. You are shaped by countless forgotten ancestors, not metaphorically, but literally. Their survival is the reason you exist. Their stories are the reason you continue. Their lives are the foundation you walk upon. Even in silence, they speak through you. The beauty of not knowing everything. We often think meaning comes from clarity, from answers, from facts, from complete understanding. But the lost epoch teaches the opposite. Meaning comes from connection, not information. Meaning comes from feeling, not chronology. Meaning comes from belonging, not certainty. You do not need to solve every mystery to feel part of a story. Sometimes the unknown is what gives the story its depth. The lost epoch is like a night sky. We cannot map every star, but the darkness makes the stars more beautiful. It is the unknown that creates wonder, and wonder is what makes us human. The past holds you even when you cannot hold it back. Close your eyes for a moment, or soften your gaze. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast field. Behind you, the entire human story, stretching deep into darkness. Ahead of you, the path of your life, unfolding gently. Feel the weight of forgotten ancestors behind you, not heavy, but steady. They carried the burden of survival, so you would not have to. They walked, so you could rest. They endured, so you could dream. They carved tools, so you could build ideas. They spread across continents, so you could inherit the world. You do not need to remember their names to honor them. Your existence is honor enough. Their story is safe in you. You are the child of 300,000 years. You are not alone in time. You stand at the very edge of a long, long journey. A journey that began with hands striking stone, with firelight flickering on cave walls, with footsteps across ancient plains, with constellations guiding migrations, with rituals whispered beneath the moon, with songs sung into the night, with dreams carried across generations. Every ancestor is behind you now, not as ghosts, not as memories, but as presence, as part of what it means to be human. You are the child of thousands of forgotten cultures, the heir to countless ancient minds, the continuation of the lost epoch. And as you lie here now, listening, breathing, resting, you are participating in the same timeless rhythm that shaped the ancient world. The journey of humanity flows through you, and that is enough. A gentle farewell to the lost epoch. The past does not end. It rests. The people do not vanish. They become part of the earth. The memories do not disappear. They become part of us. The silence does not erase meaning. It deepens it. And the lost epoch does not leave us empty-handed. It leaves us with humility, connection, wonder, gratitude, belonging, continuity. Tonight we close this journey as softly as possible. Let the weight of ancient humanity settle comfortably in your heart. Not heavy, reassuring, not overwhelming, soothing. You are part of a story so old it has no beginning. A story written in silence, in survival, in breath, in memory, in forgetting, in dreaming. A story still unfolding, a story that continues every time you inhale. Rest now, knowing you come from something vast and mysterious and deeply human. Rest knowing that the unknown is your home. That mystery is your inheritance. That silence is where the oldest truths live. Rest knowing that the lost epoch is not gone. It is within you, always. Good night. May your dreams be gentle. May your sleep be deep. And may the ancient world hold you softly as you drift into rest.